All right, start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I'm your host Ben, and the EPL is going on break. For the international window is upon us. And what a weekend to send us off with. So leading off, we had hat trick Saturday with Erling Haaland, Evan Ferguson, a player that has been spoken about on here in the past and will be talked about a ton today, and Heung-min Son of Tottenham was able to add on to that, and then we got some late drama on Sunday with Arsenal and Man United, and going off, it was kind of tipped to be the game of the week, and the game was actually quite dull for the majority of it. But the way it ended, I mean, I kind of wanted to just kind of tweet about it for 30 minutes afterwards. So it maybe did live up to the hype of being the game of the week, and not a bad game to end off the EPL schedule for a little bit. So, like I said, they do have the international window coming up, and it's a big one. Europe has their Euro qualifiers, I believe. The African countries, I believe, have their Nations Cup qualifiers as well as Common Ball for Copa. So it's not unusual the international break that we maybe see during this time. It's not really a friendly break, though it is for us. But for our team, for the U.S. team, we have it seems Berhalter has called a couple players back from Europe to join the camp. We don't always normally see that. The MLS, I think their season hasn't necessarily ended, so there could be some reasons for that to be said. But I mean, we'll get a first chance to look at the return of Berhalter ball. Maybe with Florian Balogun added in as well, as it seems he was part of the ones that was called up. But I'll get to that. I'll get to that next week. As far as storylines going, the transfer window did end, and I don't necessarily need to go over all of them. I mean, the big one that broke on Friday was Liverpool going to be tempted to sell Mohamed Salah as a Saudi club was actually offering, I think, over 200 million pounds, and once I started seeing those kind of numbers, especially the contract that was added, that got me a little nervous. But they held on. That said, the Saudi window doesn't end for another 2 weeks, so there's still going to be some of this to be said. But nothing ended up happening there. Nothing happened with Mbappe, and I'm not going to go over all of what happened, but some of the highlights or some of the main ones was Brighton did go on to bring in Ansu Fati on loan. Bar from Barcelona. Barca's number 10. And I'll get into that later on. It's kind of wild how this isn't actually a negative move. I don't think either for Fati or Barcelona lending him to a club like Brighton. And then they were able to bring in Carlos Balba, someone that they were linked to, a defensive midfielder that has some legs and some engine in him to maybe help still up that midfield. And so we'll see how those two signings work out for them. Man United did sign Amrabat, kind of a similar kind of player with Amrabat, just adding some legs into that midfield because for the first couple of weeks it has seemed like that has been a vulnerability for them. He's not terrible on the ball either, but I mean he really is known for just kind of tracking back. He was fantastic in the World Cup for Morocco. And yeah, I think it is a signing that they've needed. Not only it's protection for Casemiro, but I'm wondering if they're going to try to play them together. And then they signed Sergio Reguilon on loan. A left back. Luke Shaw is injured and out for a bit, so this kind of makes sense as well. Liverpool did go on to bring in Ryan Gravenberch of Bayern Munich, formerly of Ajax, someone that the club has apparently been looking at for a long time. Apparently, at least the way the Liverpool reporters were saying is people inside Liverpool, even when Michael Edwards was there, they kind of saw him as maybe a Jude Bellingham alternative. So that is kind of interesting. Similar style, similar height and size. Obviously, Bellingham's kind of had a different career path, and he's flying right now for Real Madrid. So we'll see. Ryan Gravenberch did not necessarily have the best time of it in Bayern Munich. Maybe they play a little bit differently. So we'll have to see. It's not the defensive midfielder that I was kind of looking at. But the way Liverpool played on Sunday, maybe they don't necessarily need an out and out number six. Maybe the idea is to kind of be really fluid in that position. And when I get to Liverpool, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. And then Man City did go on to sign Jeremy Doku and Mateus Nunes. Nunes is an interesting player that I'll get to as well. Kind of similar with Gravenbeck, and someone that City have maybe been looking at for a while. I remember when he was at Sporting, Pep actually spoke very, very highly of him in his post conferences. And I remember when Liverpool were linked to him last season, I kept thinking about that. I was like, Pep rates him, so why shouldn't Liverpool? And he didn't have the best go of it at Wolves, but he's joining a much better side, so we'll probably see a better version of him there. Wolves were forced to make a replacement, so they signed Enzo Fernandez, a midfielder from that is, I think he's Paraguayan. I think he's doing well in the Copa Libertadores, and we'll have to see. I mean, them signing Yao Gomez last year didn't necessarily hurt them, so it seems like they're comfortable looking at this market. And it feels like a Brighton kind of signing. But again, we'll have to see what he actually looks like on the field. Spurs also made some business at the final deadline day, bringing in Brendan Johnson of Nottingham Forest, someone that they were kind of linked to. I know Brendan Johnson was linked to even a move to maybe Brentford. Uh, it is an interesting signing. 50 million does seem kind of high. And he's not necessarily, the out and out goal scorer that you would maybe expect. You've lost Kane. Where are you going to get those goals? So maybe Son has maybe have an answer for that. So I mean, we'll have to see how this works. He can play. He can play in the center. He was trying to do that for Forest. He started their first week versus Arsenal, kind of doing that, and it didn't really work out, to be honest. But we'll have to see how this works. And then Forest made 7 signings themselves. I'm not going to go over all of them. I'll get to them when we get to Forest. And with Crystal Palace, they did bring in Rob Holding. So they did the Arsenal thing that I was wondering about. I was thinking about maybe Smith Rowe, and no, they went for a defender in Holding. And to me, I don't necessarily hate it because Palace are going to play differently than Arsenal. The Palace aren't going to play in a high defensive line. They're going to play to kind of sit back and be a little bit more of a transition kind of team. And when you have someone like Eze who can get the ball and be creative in space. You have, Edward has started to score some goals for them. That makes a little bit more sense. So maybe that, and it just to have him for actual depth, I think will work out. So we'll see how that signing works out for them as well. And so that is kind of the transfer roundup. And so I'll just move on to quickly to Arsenal and Man United. Arsenal do go on to win 3-1. Goals from Rashford, Martin Odegaard, really quickly following back, and then it looked like it was going to be a stalemate, and then Declan Rice was able to win it in the 90th minute or 96th minute with a corner kick that maybe shouldn't have been a corner kick. I'll get to that, and then Jesus added some window dressing at the end to make it 3-1. I mean, leading off stories, no party for Arsenal, so but we did see Zinchenko make his first start, and then for Man United. Rasmus Højlund was finally available for his debut. He didn't start, but he did come off the bench, and I thought he actually looked pretty good. We only got 15 minutes of him, but some of the runs he made, some of the link up that he showed, I do think that's very promising for Man United. And I mean, just to go over the game recap, it was a weird game because it was kind of dull for a large part of it, just because of the way Man United were intentionally slowing the game down by having Onana completely dictate the tempo. Arsenal didn't necessarily want to press with additional numbers forward. Every time they tried to press 3, Onana was almost an additional outfield player. So that was 3v4, and that was happening a lot. Onana was forced to make the right decisions, and for the most part, he was doing that. Uh, and then, we finally do get because basically, I think the graph said something like they had 200 passes or whatever, just in their own front end, in the first half, and it was mostly because of Onana, going to the center backs, maybe trying to go to the midfield and then passing it backwards. Anytime Arsenal were actually trying to advance the ball forwards, they were losing it. Onana was probably their best outfield player in that first half. But it was quite dull. And then we finally got the breakaway goal, and it came from Ericsson just kind of winning the ball back from a bad pass from Havertz. He looked up and was able to play a really nice through ball that Rashford was able to run onto, cut in towards goal, find the gap, and pick his corner and bury it. And then it really did liven up after that. About 45 seconds later, Arsenal were able to respond with Martinelli able to get the ball in the box, and he's able to send a ball in, and he finds Martin Odegaard completely open. And it's funny because Christian Eriksen is responsible for maybe their first goal with the winning the ball back and having that good through ball, and he's maybe responsible here for giving up the goal. because he loses track of Martin Odegaard. He's more worried about just kind of, yeah, I think he's ball watching. He's running into the box and he kind of just Martin Odegaard holds off his run, and when he gets the ball, Ericsson isn't able to turn and get tight enough before Odegaard can have the shot. So it was stalemate at halftime. The second half, there wasn't really a whole lot of chances either, and then we finally got a couple VAR incidents. First one being Havertz going down in the penalty area, and it looked soft, but Anthony Taylor actually did reverse his decision after getting a second look. And then we get the offsides on Garnacho, and I think this one is a little bit less clear cut because, but then that said, Gabriel does an amazing job to bend his body the way he does, and it looks like maybe Garnacho is offsides by just a shoulder blade. But it looked like Man United had stolen this, and it was similar fashion to last year in the game, but no. And in the end, we actually saw Man United's depth kind of hurt them a little bit because it's actually Arsenal that goes on to win this. And for a side that spent 250 million or so in this window, I think it's close to 4.5 or 450 million since Intag has been there. How they're in a moment where they're forced to bring on, Harry Maguire and Johnny Evans together in a back line, I think it was eye popping, and it ended up showing. I think it showed for the Declan Rice goal. Um, and then Gabriel Jesus was able to, get played on goal from the halfway mark and was able to easily beat it past Onana. For Arsenal, it's one of those like it's our destiny kind of energy where they just pull it out of nowhere. I don't necessarily think they're particularly good again, but you can do a couple of things here. You can play a game of what if for both teams that flips the narrative maybe about this game. If that Garnacho chance happens, what are people saying about Arsenal and their performance? Or if the Havertz PK happens, what are people saying about maybe Havertz? Havertz also had a really big chance early in the game that he probably should have buried. So I mean, Havertz nearly could have been a storyline as the hero instead of maybe the goat that he ended up being. Uh, for United, I do think there are some positives though. The game plan almost worked for Ten Hag, and I don't necessarily think he can do this for every game, but at least in this game, it nearly worked. Where they were able to control the game with Onana in a way that I don't think they would have been able to do last season with De Gea. Um, and I think with someone like Rasmus Højlund coming in, I think in the future they can maybe lure teams to sleep by doing this kind of possession stuff, and then trying to go long, where Holland can maybe flick a ball to Rashford to make a run onto. But another note I had was I thought the defensive effort that Antony gave, I thought was much better than he had done in the past. It felt like he was helping Wan-Bissaka out. Arsenal didn't really have those overloads that they've had in the past, but that said, it looks like Anthony might be in some trouble here because something has come out where there's been an investigation opened up in Brazil. I think he's been taken off the Brazil national team, at least suspended for the minute, and because of an investigation into some actions he's done with his girlfriend. And especially with Man United, this is a very serious allegation, very serious story because given what they just went through with Mason Greenwood. And so we'll have to. This will be something we might have to follow. Uh, and so there's that. And there's a Sancho story that came out after that as well. I think they're actually linked, but I'm only speculating. Not that Sancho has an incidents with his girlfriend. I think he's been making some. I think he's the way I would speculate it is he is maybe noticing Antony being treated differently than Mason Greenwood, and maybe he's wondering why he isn't being played, why he hasn't been getting playing time, where Anthony has been starting every game. I'm just wondering. Um, but I mean, it wasn't. Man United still look a work in progress. I mean, Ericsson, no Mason Mount, this game, and you know, it's funny because with Ericsson, you see what he offers with the ball. The goal basically happens because of him, but you also see where he's limited. Because again, the goal happens with him as well. So I mean, they have brought in Amrabat, and that is some legs and steel to win the ball back to cover a little bit more ground in midfield. So we'll see. We'll see what the idea is to try with him, and we'll see what the idea is to try with Mason Mount when he does return. Maybe if you can find a way to try to play him forward, maybe switch him in and Bruno off, give Bruno some rest here and there because Bruno has played a lot of minutes the last year or so. Um, So, I mean, with Man United, the lineup was, Luke Shaw's being out, Varane being out, and Man United's backline depth really did show. And then for Arsenal, we got the back line that maybe we've been expecting, with Ben White, Saliba, Gabriel, Zinchenko, and then Odegaard, Rice, and Havertz, and then what you probably would expect with Saka, Nketiah, and Martinelli. Zinchenko back was big, and it was interesting to see Nketiah start over Jesus. But there weren't a lot of chances, in this first half. But one I definitely wanna highlight is one that Havertz has, because it's one of the few it's one of the few times when you almost see the vision that Arteta is trying to pull off here. I mean, Declan Rice wins the ball back, Arsenal break with Martinelli, the ball is sent in, and Dalot makes a mess of things. Dalot had a good game, but he made a mess of things here. The ball just falls right to Kai Havertz's lap, and he missed the chance. And this is begging to be a goal. This is begging to maybe get him going. He's in the perfect spot, and he just whips it. But the reason why I say you almost see Arteta's vision is Havertz makes a run from so deep, he almost walks into the penalty area unmarked. Man United just completely miss him, and there's a little chaos into the box, and the chaos finds the 6'2" attacker, and just he can't make the chance count. Um, but I mean, that was as far as chances went. That was the game, because the first 28 minutes or so, Man United were hogging on the ball with Onana, and there wasn't really any intent showed to actually attack, but what they were doing is just keeping the ball. And another thing too was just no one else on the team was actually able to complete a forward pass. To be honest, because anytime they did try to cross into Arsenal's half, they were losing it. I mean, Declan Rice was doing pretty good to get a couple turnovers, as well, but what's funny enough is the one moment when Arsenal was like, "Fine, we've already had enough." When Declan Rice did go forward to be a pressing number, to give Arsenal a numbers advantage, that was where the goal happened. And so they actually do get Onana to go sideways, and he passes it to Wan-Bissaka. Wan-Bissaka is kind of cornered. He tries to pass it, and basically it goes to Eddie Nketiah. Nketiah wins the ball back. It looks like Arsenal are actually it may be the team to score themselves, and what happens instead is, uh, I think it's Kai Havertz. Kai Havertz gets the ball and has a really lazy pass to Christian Eriksen. I mean, he like floats this. If it's hit harder, I think it can get to Eriksen. There's no issue here. But I mean, not Eriksen, Odegaard, and because it's hit so softly, Eriksen is actually able to run onto it and intercept it. And you have Declan Rice that is already further upfield trying to press Onana, so he's out of the play, and there goes your defensive destroyer. And the gap to end up to play the ball to Rashford making a run behind Ben White is quite large, and so that's what happens. Rashford gets the ball, and he's able to just kind of cut in towards goal, cut in across goal from the left side, which he likes doing, and he's able to freeze Ben White and able to freeze Saliba and get the shot on target. Um, and honestly, it's maybe the only touch or the first touch that Man United has in Arsenal's penalty area, and it's the goal. And then that did liven the game up at least because Arsenal responded very, very quickly. Gabriel has a nice forward pass that finds Martinelli. Martinelli one time flicks the ball backwards to Zinchenko, running behind him, and that's what gets Zinchenko behind Wan-Bissaka. Zinchenko then picks out Nketiah. Nketiah passes it to Martinelli, who had continued his run into the box, where Martinelli picks out Odegaard, who had held his run top of the box, losing Eriksen, who was basically it looked like he was just kind of following the ball. And the pass that Martinelli has to Odegaard is really good because it goes through Casemiro's legs, and that just kind of shows you how close the margins can be to something completely coming off to something just not. So the halftime thoughts: 200 or so passes were completed by Man United in their own half, and that was because of what Onana was doing. They actually did outpass Arsenal in the first half, and again, that was because of what they were doing with Onana. But it wasn't really to threaten Arsenal's goal. It was more to just kind of kill the game out. It was an interesting tactic. I guess I'll say that. Um, Man United did have a chance with Rashford in the 55th minute. It was like one of the few times when Christian Eriksen was able to find Bruno's feet, and Bruno was able to just play a through ball to find an attacker. And it was maybe the one time that Martial was able to get a touch inside the box. It forces a decent save, and then it goes to Rashford, and Rashford tries to hit, and I think it actually doesn't even hit. I think it basically hits Saliba's leg, just kind of sticking out and deflects out of bounds. It was close. I mean, this could have bounced anywhere, but that was really all the intent that Man United had before this, and this is maybe where the game it could have changed or not. It's the PK or the PK shout. And I am kinda iffy on this because I do think there is contact, but I also think Havertz goes down easily. But again, I feel like that's a judgment call. There is contact, so I was surprised that the call on the field didn't stand. But I'm more interested in how this started because Nketiah does really. Nketiah maybe didn't have the glamorous game, but what he did here was really good. He basically causes this. So he drops in the midfield looking for the ball, and then he brings Lindelof with him, leaving that space, and then he turns and he runs with the ball, and that actually brings multiple additional Man United players to run onto him, leaving their guy open, leaving who the guys that they were marked, leaving someone else open. And then Nketiah threads a very nice ball that finds Havertz, and then Havertz kind of turns on it and feeding into the box, and he does a good job to at least get past Wan-Bissaka, and basically he's kind of clattered into by both Wan-Bissaka and and I think it's Casemiro, and what again it's body on body contact with none of them getting the ball. So and then Havertz goes down. It looks like he went down easily, but again, I was surprised that at least the call on the field didn't stand. I'll just kind of say it that way. And then probably where Man United did lose the game is Martinez got injured and had to go off, where Harry Maguire came on. But also, Haaland was able to come on and make his debut, and he had a decent debut, to be honest. Let's see here. Another note I had was Man United. I felt like we're getting better defensive support this week than they had in the past. Anthony was tracking back and doing well, but I thought the fullbacks were doing well versus Martinelli and Saka. You don't really remember them actually having a lot of success 1v1. They were still able to get in behind, but it required maybe some kind of link up play and some kind of overlap. But anyways, and then I'll get to there was a big chance for soccer where soccer probably should have put this away because they do everything right here, and it's just the only thing is missing is just the soccer finish. But it's quick passing in and around the Man United penalty area. Odegaard kind of fakes like he's going to try something from distance, and that draws Rashford and Dallo onto him, and only to pass it out wide to Ben White, keeping the width, where White is unmarked and sends in a very nice ball into the 6-yard area that finds Saka basically looking to tap this in, and Saka just hits it right at Onana. But one thing I wanted to highlight is you see Harry Maguire looking really, really poor here. At first, he runs up thinking that he can maybe catch Ben White offsides. He's not. And all he does here is he leaves Soccer wide open where Ben White crosses the ball to him anyways. And this was Harry Maguire nearly cost a goal here and probably should have. And then we get to the where the United maybe thought they had won the game with Garnacho. Uh, First, it's a really good job by Bruno to slide tackle on Jesus to win the ball back, and then it's kind of it's funny. Bruno does Casemiro's job. Casemiro does Bruno's job because Casemiro then plays the perfect ball for Garnacho to make a run in behind. He looks through on goal and he does beat Ramsdale, but I guess he's a kneecap offsides because of what Gabriel does. Gabriel is like Neo from the Matrix, the way he contorts his body. Uh, but before this, there's also a really nice flick by Haaland here. I mean, maybe Casemiro or maybe Bruno is trying to play the ball to Casemiro, and what Haaland does is he runs to it and then does a little flick to get Casemiro the ball where that takes Saliba out of the play. So that little clever flick was nice, and then Casemiro just was able to feed a ball to Haaland. I mean to Garnacho making a run where Gabriel probably figures he's going to get beat for pace, so he just does what he can, and he basically tries to do the offside trap, last ditch effort, and he's rewarded with it with the lines. So I mean, Man United were close to actually winning this. It felt. And then it's Arsenal that win it. And what's funny enough is I don't necessarily know if this is a controversial thing, but because I missed it in real time. But in second viewing, it looks like the corner kick that Rice wins, Arsenal win this off on, is not really a corner kick. Odegaard is trying a shot, and he's rewarded with a shot that goes over the bar. It doesn't really look like there's any kind of deflection here. It just looks like Odegaard ballooned this. But anyways, I don't think that's why Man United lose this game. Johnny Evans and Harry Maguire are both trying to buy a foul. I'm more interested in trying to buy a foul than charge Declan Rice after he gets the ball. And Rice's shot just kind of banks off Evans' thigh to beat Onana. I don't really think Onana should have been beaten from the near post, to be honest. But Man United having to play this final 10 minutes or so with Evans and Harry Maguire in 2013 showed up in the final minutes, and that really is what it did them in. Um, But, to touch on with Rice, it is kind of fitting for him to be the hero. I think, there's been a discussion from a lot of people, not just I'll include myself, with that. Maybe I'm projecting a little bit. Was he really worth the 100 million that they've spent on? West Ham have looked quite good with Alvarez. But this is he even a better holding mid DM than Thomas Partey? And, for people doubting him, the fair play to at least, shut people up, at least, at least for this week. But, it is a fantastic moment for him, and, I think the announcer had a perfect call, basically saying, he's a gunner for life. So, well done to Declan Rice. And then Arsenal's, Gabriel Jesus was able to add, one final one to just kind of add a little window dressing. I really did like the ball that Fabio Vieira, played to Jesus, and then, Jesus, looked like, maybe Dallo was going to catch on to him, and he did a fake shot to kinda dummy Dallo, and then was able to beat Onana. I feel like Onana could have maybe charged at Jesus to make the angle harder, and he didn't. Uh, but it really was a weird game. It was, because the way it finished is not what it was like watching it live. It was very dry at times, mostly because of the way that United were controlling it with Onana. Um, it felt like, Man United had a game plan to just kind of, just live and die off the counter, and it almost worked, to their favor. But yeah, I mean, yeah, the stats kind of pointed out. I mean, actually, it was 2.2, Man United in 0.9, Arsenal 17 shots and 5 on target, Man United with 10 and only 2 on target, 12 corner kicks versus 3, and that kind of says it all, especially in the second half. Possession was 55 to 45, but it was flipped. Man United had more possession and more passes in the first half because of what Onana was doing. Arsenal was 464, 87%. Man United 392, 85%. But they had what's interesting is they had something like 246 passes in the first half. So only 146 in the second half. I don't necessarily know if Arsenal were doing a better job pressing them and getting them to turn it over, or maybe Man United just decided not to do the Onana stuff. But either way, something definitely flipped. I mean, to touch on with Arsenal, it's definitely good to have Zinchenko back for them. You see things move a lot smoother. I think the idea is to maybe once he Zinchenko has this kind of a role in midfield, that basically allows maybe someone like Havertz to have a free role. So I think that's kind of the idea that Arteta is thinking. But again, we have to see a little bit of it more to see if it'll actually work or not. Jesus and Ray Nelson were able to come on, for second half appearances. I think that's good. And outside of Timber, they're starting to look healthy, and they have Champions League coming up when the international break returns. So it's good. It's good for them to be healthy and have a big squad. And I think Fabio Vieira looks a better player than he did for them last season. He came off the bench and had another good assist. Uh, and just kind of the topics. I mean, if Man United were playing the final, let's kind of hold our horses a little bit, because Man United were playing the final 10 minutes with the back line of Johnny Evans and Harry Maguire. And it's a home game at the Emirates. It's on the back of the Fulham draw. It felt like this could have been a step backwards had they not gotten max points. So, uh, has Arteta improved the squad? Have they taken a step back? About the same. I do think there are two ways to kind of look at this, especially looking at how he's playing Havertz. I do think there's good and bad. I mean, this game kind of showcased both. To be honest, he almost draws the PK, but he had that really terrible miss. But do you value that him getting into the box and having those bad misses as things that'll eventually turn, because he is getting into good areas. I guess you can maybe say that, but uh, one thing that I'm noticing is he's still struggling to maybe understand the role himself, because way too often, at least in that first half, he was just standing still. He was standing in the left half space looking for the ball, and he wasn't really moving. And so when Martinelli was cutting inside and someone had, say, Havertz was marked by someone, and when Martinelli was cutting inside, Martinelli is basically guarded by two people, by someone trying to guard Martinelli, or the player that was already guarding Havertz. So that was happening way too often. Havertz needed to When Martinelli does that, Havertz needs to either go out wide or move himself. And that wasn't necessarily happening. So I mean, there's still time for him to kind of learn. He's playing a new position. But he needs to come good, because if not, Arteta is going to look a little foolish, especially the way Fabio Vieira is playing when he comes on from the bench. So I do think there are two sides to this. I mean, he is 6'2", and he's elite in the air. And one thing I noticed last season was a lot of teams were actually packing it in versus them towards the end of the season, and they ran out of energy. Saka and I think Martinelli just kind of their legs got tired, and they weren't able to necessarily create and beat enough people. With at least score enough creative goals. They were forced to kind of cross some things in for hopeful balls into the box, and they just didn't have the size to do that last season. I think with Havertz, you do have that. Yeah, I didn't feel like Arteta trusted Nketiah. I mean, Havertz and Nketiah are both. I think Nketiah is like 6 foot as well. So I think eventually that is what Arteta is thinking. He's thinking he can find a way to just kind of fit Havertz into this field. Uh, give him a kind of a fake role. We'll have to see. But the idea is to just fit an additional attacker into the box to maybe stop the issues that they were having last season. I think maybe with Zinchenko back, that the theory is that he can basically do two positions, and that allows Howard to have a free position. Another thing I was wondering about is Arteta is starting to. He had an injury crisis last season. And one thing he's done this season is, playing Thomas Partey at right back is that to give him some kind of game times just in that kind of position. Ben White playing at center back is the idea, just kind of give him games in that position just in case something happens like what happened last season. I think Timber was supposed to be cover for both Saliba and Zinchenko. So it seems maybe Arteta has been trying to establish a little bit of a bench depth, knowing that he's got a big squad, he's got more games, maybe the more important games, I guess you could say, this season with the Champions League. We'll have to see. And then Declan Rice does get his hero moment, and uh, you know, it works because Thomas Partey missed this game, and last season this actually you feel like this would have been a pretty big miss. Uh, so I mean, Declan Rice was able to he's very good at being what you would normally ask a number six to do. He's very good at closing down people. He's very good at cutting down space. Very good at winning the ball back. He's just not nearly the passer that Thomas Partey is. So this is where Arteta needs to earn his earnings, I guess. Not, I don't necessarily know if that's that. Earn his straps, whatever. Because if Arteta can find a way to improve Declan Rice's passing, then he will be worth that $100 million. So if the idea maybe is the that maybe that is the idea, where they see something where they can learn this out of him with better coaching. It being at West Ham, it's not the same thing at being at Arsenal and having a different sort a player. We'll have to see if that pans out over the season or not. Because at least so far, one of the reasons why I think they've been struggling a little bit is because of that. Declan Rice isn't the passer, the forward passer that Thomas Partey is, the line splitting passer that Thomas Partey is. Um, and then moving on to Man United, it's hard not to focus on Harry Maguire and Evans, center back pairing two in the game. I mean, one positive is I thought Wan-Bissaka and Dalot did a decent job on Arsenal's wide players. Uh, yeah, you don't really remember Saka or Martinelli actually beating them 1v1 a bunch of times. The one big chance that happened in the second half was when Saka was moved centrally to get away from Dalot. So you can maybe kind of go there. I mean, Wan-Bissaka, his issue is just he's limited on the ball. I think that's a big problem, especially if you're going to play this kind of you're going to try to do this Brighton or City stuff with Onana. Onana's going to be limited with who he can actually pass to. Teams are going to immediately recognize you can probably mark Wan-Bissaka. You can probably try to press them to pass the ball to Martin Bissaka, because that actually is almost what led to that is actually what led to our Man United's first goal. But it almost led to Arsenal actually having the turnover. So let's see. I mean, there are a bunch of negatives, though. I mean, a similar story from past weeks, where they're not tracking midfield runners leads to a goal conceded. Maybe Onana could have done better. On the goals with some saves. Martial goes missing again, but they have Rasmus to now play. I thought he actually did have a pretty good debut. And then you have the Jadon Sancho post game, and with the Anthony stuff, this makes a little bit more sense. Again, I am only speculating, but it came out basically that Sancho was not included in the squad, and then Ten Hag said it was because he wasn't training properly. I have a feeling Sancho has been making some mess behind the scenes, and it is we'll have to see how this works out. It seems like there's a bit of a riffle though, and it's not the first time that this has happened with Ten Hag, where a player has kind of gone behind his back. Ronaldo kind of did that. So well, that's probably a story to follow on for the next few weeks. And then with I guess the topic to get to is you can play maybe a game of what if, like if the Garnacho chance counts. Are a lot of people having opposite takes about this game than I mean, how are people reversing themselves? I'm going to be consistent. So I'm going to say that even if United had won this game, say that Garnacho chance happens, uh, I think it would have been maybe more 3 points stolen than anything else. I don't necessarily think it's a side that's set up to compete yet. It does feel like that could be harsh, and I need to see what Amrabat looks like. But Man United have its problem of their own with Mason Mount. Where do you actually play him? Maybe the idea again is to rotate him with Bruno. I don't necessarily know if the idea is to pay 60 million to have, someone to just kind of be a rotate squad option. But it could be that could actually help them out at least when it comes to winning games. I mean, that's an expensive way to do it, but I don't necessarily think Mason Mount playing deeper as Casemiro's pivot mate works. I think it's left him too exposed, too open. I don't necessarily think he's a good enough passer to do that job either. And then, something to maybe also say is we haven't gotten to see them, full 90 with Hoyland. And from that cameo that we got, I think there's a lot of reasons for Man United fans to be optimistic. And then another thing to say is, Onana is going to give them an advantage on the ball that they just didn't have last season, especially because it's going to force teams to maybe lure them to sleep, and it's going to force teams to push more numbers forward to get Man United to turn the ball over. What happened uh, uh, where the goal that they ended up scoring on was Arsenal. Once they got the ball off Kai Havertz, there was no Declan Rice because Declan Rice had left to go try to press Onana or to try to run at Wan-Bissaka. So you made the best guy at closing out gaps in midfield to kind of stop any of that. You forced him to go further upfield than maybe he would have preferred, and by doing that, you made Arsenal a little bit more vulnerable. So I think Man United will be able to do this to other teams. It depends how they'll be able to manage actually being pressed that much. I mean, that's going to put a lot of pressure on Onana to make the right decisions, to make the right reads, make the right passes. But so there's the positive of that. But on the flip side, he needs to start making some De Gea like saves. So because I especially at the near post, I don't think you should be beaten. But anyways, we'll move on to Newcastle and Brighton. And Newcastle, Brighton go on to win 3-1 with Evan Ferguson hat trick, and then Callum Wilson got one at the very end. And the leadoff story is Evan Ferguson should not be doing this at 18. It don't want to exaggerate, but it does feel kind of the next Harry Kane. And then with Newcastle, a note I had was is there a ceiling a little bit with Eddie Howe? We'll have to see. I mean, City's takeover had Mark Hughes, I believe, before they got Roberto Mancini, and I don't know if the idea is maybe Eddie Howe has done a really good job to build Newcastle up, maybe for the next guy to come in and maybe get them up to the next step. We'll have to see. I mean, he's certainly come in and he's gotten them to the Champions League. I don't necessarily want to. I don't want to disparage him yet. And coming in, I was quite high on Newcastle. So, I mean, it's been the schedule has been absolute murder's row, to be fair. So there is worth keeping that in mind. But it was a big game for both teams to bounce back. Only one did, but it really was a coming out story for Evan Ferguson, who basically announced himself, and he for him only being 18 is wild. He looks 25, both physically and just the way he plays. Um, and then, another note I kinda had was it was a story maybe of both managers being different and one being a little bit more ruthless in his decision making and lineup calls, than the other. And so, when we get to Brighton, James Milner and Adam Webster had horrid games versus West Ham. And so what happened here? They were immediately benched for Veltman and Van Hecke. And Van Hecke had a good game on Alexander Isak. And then we got to see Yao Pedro and Evan Ferguson play together and start. And if you remember back to at least the first game of the season, it was Welbeck starting. I think Welbeck even started versus Wolves, and Welbeck didn't have necessarily a bad game versus Wolves. It just kind of De Zerbi is having people a little bit more on their toes. We saw Verbruggen, come in for Jason Steele the last couple of games, and that feels way different than what we've seen with maybe Eddie Howe and Newcastle, where maybe he's kind of babying Pope a little bit. But I'm just kind of speculating. Uh, with Newcastle, the issue was how do you play without Sven Botman, and they don't have an answer because what they tried did not work. Dan Burn did not have a good game, and neither did Matt Targett, and so, but neither did Joe Linton. Just the midfield kind of looks a little off to me, which we'll get to. Also, the attack looks a little off as well. For this is Almiron, Ishak, and Gordon to only have 2 shots on target, I think is troubling, especially when you got someone like Callum Wilson just sitting on the bench and all he's done is produce when he's played. Uh, I mean, Newcastle did start off the better team. They had 2 really early chances in the first like 4 minutes. One with Ishak where immediately Van Hecke actually rewards De Zerbi by being picked because Van Hecke does a really good job to stop Ishak kind of in the box. And this is Louis Stunk's territory. So Van Hecke is not even supposed to be there, so he does an amazing job to recover for there. And then in the 4th minute, Ishak had another opportunity where it looked like Tonali had won the ball off Estupiñán, got to the byline to cross into the box, and Ishak just can't get the shot on target. And this is one area where I do think someone like Wilson being played instead, he probably does bury this. So it was just, there's just, I can only speculate, but that just kind of that was a thought that went into my head. Uh, and then, Brighton didn't necessarily start off that great, but around like the 13th minute or so, they really did take control of the game. But around the 6th minute, something happened where, Marsh started to just take Matt Target out for lunch. It's just kind of a give and go here by Gross and Marsh to get both Target and Dan Burn out of position. And then a minute later, Brighton got behind Target again with kind of Veltman playing Marsh, a ball. Nothing came from it but a corner kick. Basically, they got 3 corner kicks in a row kind of doing this. Marsh was able to get behind Target at the 10th minute mark, also leading to a corner kick. And it just seemed, Sully Marsh just enjoyed kind of getting a chance to go against them. The first big chance came in the 13th minute. So it's Gilmore to Ferguson. And I want to highlight this because Brighton are just kind of kicking it side to side. Newcastle seem to be in pretty good shape. But then João Pedro runs over to Matoma, and that brings alongside a defender with him. That creates a little gap to maybe feed in a little ball into the penalty area, and Gilmore recognizes it and plays it. And again, Dan Burn is the one that's targeted because Evan Ferguson just straight runs in front of him, looking for the ball, and he gets it from Gilmore and tries a shot. The first time shot, it goes right to Pope, but at least you saw how dangerous Ferguson can be, a good recognition, and you also saw uh, how dangerous Billy Gilmore can be, and that'll be a theme. And then Newcastle had a chance with Almiron just getting in behind Estupiñán. He's able to at least force a save. Uh, and then maybe before the goal, the game did open up a little bit. So Yao Pedro was looking pretty good, strong in the box, and then basically was bowled over. There was no foul call. Bruno gets the ball and is strong on it, and then Newcastle allowed to break into a counter. Ishak gets the ball in the penalty area and fires it across goal, and just no one's on the end of it. Anthony Gordon has maybe the closest, and he's made a run to the back post, and there's just no midfield runners to join in. I feel like someone like Longstaff had been on the field at this point. This probably is a goal. Someone like maybe Harvey Barnes had been instead of Gordon. This maybe is a goal, and maybe Newcastle will go on to win or lead 1-0. Instead that didn't happen. But another thing that was interesting was Brighton around like the 20th minute or so were really starting to take control of the game. I think they had 70% of the ball and they had 7 shots. And Billy Gilmore was really starting to run the show. Newcastle had no way to turn him over. He was constantly finding a gap between Ishak and Tonali when Newcastle were trying to press. And Brighton kept playing triangle passes with the center backs and him, and he was kind of the anchor to it. And then Gilmore was getting the ball turning, and then was able to either spread the ball upfield. He was going long, or he was finding feet in front of him, and he just kept finding gaps. And Newcastle were really struggling. Another thing that was noticing was Ferguson and Pedro being played together was a pretty good partnership. Both can drop for the ball, but they weren't necessarily doing it at the same time, which I really liked. And Pedro was kind of almost like the outlet when Newcastle were trying to press. He was running into midfield and kind of being a way to kind of be a numbers advantage. And that was helping. And when they were going forward, it seemed like Ferguson and Pedro had support, and it was. I think that is important. So many times it looked like Ishak didn't have that. Ishak was kind of isolated. Marsh and Matoma were occupying the wings. There was always Ferguson and Pedro were kind of close to each other at all times. So there was always kind of a passing option. Again, Ishak did kind of miss that, I thought. And then I'll get to the goal, and it is scored by Ferguson, and Billy Gilmore kind of creates it as well. It's just kind of a simple chase ball by Dunk. Newcastle should be able to handle this though. And Pope does make a meal of it. He can easily boot this out of bounds, but he's worried about Matoma. And this is maybe what happens when your team only has 30% of the ball, and maybe that was in Pope's mind. He didn't want to give it away, but he boots it right to a Stupien, and then Trippier does something stupid. He goes to the ground for no reason, taking himself out of the play, and that allows Stupian to play a simple ball to Matoma, running outside him. And then Matoma just fires the ball near Pope. It is stopped, but the rebound falls to Gilmore, who has a crack of a shot. And then Pope spills it. He tries to catch this, which is kind of weird. I feel like he could easily parry this away. And the rebound falls right to Ferguson, kind of for the easy putback. There are a number of errors, though, that happen for Newcastle here. Pope has two big ones. Because again, he doesn't have to catch this, but Trippier going to ground the way he does, that shouldn't happen. Tonali has a weak swing at the ball, a loose ball, and misses before it finds Gilmore. Dan Burns slides to stop Matoma and is lazy to getting up. And that's the reason why Ferguson is on sides when he gets the ball. And yeah, Dan Burn is, let's see. Dan Burn is also the one playing Matoma on sides in the beginning when Estupiñán gets the ball. So yeah, there were a number of issues there. Dan Burn didn't have his best game. And then we have a Brighton chance, and this one should have been a goal as well. This was really, really good by both Ferguson and Yao Pedro, but it's also Ferguson just abusing Dan Burn because he gets the ball, he turns on it. Dan Burn tries to get tight on him, and Everton Ferguson turns him. And try to remember that because there's a similar moment that happens in the second half where Dan Burn decides not to get tight on Ferguson, having that thought in his mind, and that ends up burning him as well. But João Pedro gets the ball kind of in the box, and he just can't keep the effort down. And this comes just moments after where Newcastle actually had a chance to level things with Joe Linton. So it was back and back. It was relatively an even contest. It was only 1-0 at halftime. But the numbers were not kind to Newcastle. I think there was a graph in the 48th minute where Gordon only had 8 touches in the game. Dan Burn had 9. Ishak had 11, and Tonali only had 11. Newcastle weren't really able to get a hold on the ball, and it seemed like Brighton were finding just a numbers advantage everywhere. There's so many times it seemed like Brighton had 2v1s. Uh, to me, it felt like the energy levels for Newcastle in midfield looked off. And again, I kind of look at Joe Linton and maybe Longstaff as maybe something to look at. But again, the way Ishak was isolated, I was wondering why couldn't you try uh, Ishak and Callum Wilson together, kind of playing the way that Brighton were playing with Ferguson and Yao Pedro. And so and then for Brighton, Billy Gilmore was running the show, and that continued in the second half. Eddie Howe did make some changes about the 50th minute mark when it was still only a 1-0 game. So Callum Wilson did come on. He came on for Almiron. That moved Gordon over to right wing, moved Ishak over to left wing. So at least they played them together at the same time. Though I don't necessarily think this is the same thing because again, when you're on the wing, you can still be isolated. So uh, it I guess maybe he just doesn't wanna leave his 4-3-3, but it wasn't really working when you were trying to press him, so I don't know. And then brought on, Elliot Anderson, for Joe Linton, and I think Longstaff for Tonali. And they did have a chance, Ishak did have a chance to get when he got into the box, but, again, Van Hecker was there to snuff it out. And then, Brighton were able to go ahead with the second with Ferguson. And, it's Gilmore to Ferguson again, and it's Dan Burn and Nick Pope again for Newcastle. Ferguson just runs towards the ball and he leaves Dan Burn. Dan Burn opts not to follow him, but Dan Burn, I think, is worried about Pascal Gross. Pascal Gross is completely free. No one's marking him, and Pascal Gross can make a run over him as well. So Dan Burn's kind of caught in no man's land. But another thing, too, is he has a chance to maybe it's fine to let Ferguson collect the ball, but he doesn't really charge at him or anything. And so Ferguson has a lot of time to look up and see that there's a wide open gap to take a shot near the goal, and he beats Nick Pope from about 25 yards out. And I kind of feel like Nick Pope should do better here because there's no one in front of him, so he should be able to see this the entire way. And it's not like Ferguson has a a cannon of a hit. He almost passes it in. So I think Nick Pope was just kind of surprised the how accurate the shot was, but that was an issue. And then Newcastle maybe had a chance to get back in it, make it 2-1, similar to what happened when Brighton conceded the first scored the first goal. They nearly conceded. They nearly conceded here, where Gordon just the ball was kind of crossed in to the box. I think Anderson does really well to get the ball from the byline and it has a cross in, and Gordon from just 8 yards out completely fluffs it, and then that was really the game. Then Brighton were able to make it 3-0. Ferguson kills the game off. A bit of luck with the deflection, that wrong Pope. But I want to highlight this because it's another really good setup by Billy Gilmore, who he slips the ball to Matoma. Matoma's found a little pocket of space between Longstaff, Gordon, and Trippier. Trippier doesn't really want to get tight on. Trippier has to worry about Estupiñán on the wing side. It's worth kind of saying as well. And Matoma does a good job to kind of be in the middle, be in this central area, and he gets the ball and does a quick turn. So Newcastle was supposed to have numbers kind of close to him, and because of that quick turn, they can't get near him. And then Matoma kind of dribbles to Ferguson, passes it to him, and then Ferguson just kind of tries his luck. There was a lot of luck here, but I feel like Newcastle kind of deserved it, just the way that they looked off again. When Trippier is kind of forced to decide between Estupiñán and Matoma. That was happening a lot in this game, where there were a bunch of like 2v1s for no reason whatsoever, and then Newcastle do get some kind of reprieve with Callum Wilson. Uh, this Newcastle do seem to have real issues. I've highlighted Dan Burn and Target, but I think Nick Pope maybe needs to be looked at as well. I mean, they did start off well, but after the first 10 minutes or so, they lost completely. Brighton took complete control of the game and never really lost it back. There were a couple opportunities for Newcastle to equalize, to cut into it, minutes after Brighton had scored, and they just didn't take them. Man of the match, Evan Ferguson has the hat trick. I kind of think the man of the match is Billy Gilmore, but give it to the 18-year-old who got the goals. But Billy Gilmore was special in this game, and I'll get to him as well. In key stats, 1.3 for XG for Brighton, 1.23. That's a bit surprising. 15 shots and 6 on target, and this is the big one: 9 shots and 2 on target. But this was also a big one: 500 passes for Brighton. That's what you expect. 90% accuracy versus Newcastle, a team that's very good at pressing and getting turnovers. That is impressive and not surprising or not expected. Uh, with Brighton, you have this 18-year-old Evan Ferguson with the hat trick, and you brought in a youngster in Ansu Fati. Barca's number 10. You've also brought in Carlos Beba to maybe be a Caicedo replacement. We'll have to see a defensive midfielder with an engine with legs. There's a lot to be positives about. But another thing too that's interesting is it's the way De Zerbi can be ruthless. And I think it's rewarded, at least in this case, because dropping Milner and Webster was absolutely the right call. He was rewarded with Van Hecke's performance and rewarded with Veltman. But also the way he's treated Van Berge and Jason Steele. Now, this can always backfire on you, but I think it's been good to kind of just bring in competition for Jason Steele to keep both on their toes. Where Newcastle have not done this with Nick Pope, and I think that's maybe kind of showing up a little bit here. But Billy Gilmore on the ball. I want to touch on this. He looks like Alexis McAllister. And one thing I noticed in their first game when it was Dahoud and Pascal Gross anchoring that midfield is it didn't seem like they were able to play these kind of through balls or these kind of line splitting balls that Gilmore was offering, and it's completely changed it. It's he created the kind of forward passes that advance the ball from the second phase to the final third phase of possession that McAllister was doing for them last season, and he's looked quite good the last couple of games. Um, Maybe a negative is Brighton haven't kept a clean sheet, but that is kind of grasping at straws. But I mean, Brighton's system is it seems like it's as important as the players. You turn around and now every single week there's a new player that's kind of making headlines. Now, I don't think Evan Ferguson is necessarily a new player, but it is weird how if you go back to week one, he didn't start. So that and you're adding Ansu Fati to this. as well. But I mean, Chelsea tries to steal all their players, coaches, and scouts, and Brighton just seemed to get better and better after that. That is quite interesting. It's also interesting to see Casado had a turnover, had a mistake, and he doesn't seem to be as calm on the ball as he did last season for Brighton. It is kind of early days, and he's joining a new team, but McAllister isn't having that issue at Liverpool, so that is interesting to me. And I'm going to be interested to see how Fadi is going to work into this. It being just a loan, but it makes sense because Enciso's injury is long term. But you expect him to be able to recover sometime next season. So a loan makes sense. And to think about it this way, for Brighton to get Barcelona's kind of at one point he was kind of seen as like Barcelona's future. He has had some injuries and setbacks himself, but he's still crazy young. It's not like this is a negative move either. And to think back 3 years ago, that is kind of hard to imagine. But sometimes progressive change is good, or change is good, especially progressive change. And this isn't necessarily something to be negative about, and really it's a sign that Barca is seeing what Brighton's doing with just the club and De Serbi, and they don't think it's going to be a negative move for him either. They're trusting him they're trusting their young jewel to Brighton. So, but I think another thing that's kind of factoring in here is Barca has a young kid in themselves in Yuval that is flying, Yumal, that is flying, for them. He's only 16, which is, they keep getting younger. But he is for 16, he's already, finding a way to get into the senior lineup. I think he started the last game. So eh, it is hard to kind of wrap the mind around that. One thing I do want to touch on with Brighton is one I guess one final thing is the work rate of Matoma and Marsh kind of can go unnoticed. But the reason why Newcastle never really had any time on the ball is the wide attacking players were just doing an amazing job defensively when Newcastle had the ball, because it never seemed like there was a man that was open to pass it, or whenever someone got it on the wing, they had to immediately get rid of it. Just they absolutely terrorized Newcastle. And it's funny, you kind of think of Newcastle being the team to kind of do that instead. And then that Pedro and now Pedro and Ferguson partnership I thought was really good. Two strikers that can kind of drop deep if needed, but they had an understanding of when one does it, one stays up. It was never both doing it and uh, you know leaving the center backs with kind of nothing to do. And the way that they're able to mix it, that was also really confusing. So I really did like it. And also Yao Pedro, the way Ferguson gets the goals, but Pedro was almost kind of the pressing outlet sometimes when Brighton were looking to kind of pass and looking just kind of relieve pressure. Pedro was dropping in and was getting the ball and doing a quick turn, and Newcastle were not able to get a glove on him. And he was just as important to Brighton's success this game as Ferguson. And then we get to Ferguson, and he's only 18, but again, he looks like he's 25, and he feels generational. Now again, we only have a year to go off for his portfolio, I guess you could say. But it is a good one, an impressive one, and it just feels there isn't really a weakness to his game. He's got a body and strength to give center backs mismatches. He can be physical. He obviously shows good poacher instincts. He recognizes where to be in the box. He has a shot on him, as we can see, and yeah, he just seems he can also drop and link a play. He doesn't really have a heavy touch. That is something to say as well. And yeah, Ireland maybe has their own Harry Kane. We'll have to see. And with Newcastle, the things to maybe say is the schedule is murderer's row. So that is something you can maybe kind of hold on to a little bit here, um, because it is losing by a goal to City. I don't think is that bad. Losing to Liverpool in the manner that they did, being up a man, but you went up against a really good keeper. That can maybe be excused. But here, for a side looking to challenge for for silverware or a Champions League, you can't have Dan Burn in the team. He's just he was targeted, to be honest, and so was Matt Target. No pun intended. So I think, and then another thing too is just at least so far this season, the chemistry in the midfield and I guess front line has not been there that we saw last season. So Eddie Howe, I think, has some tinkering to do. I mean, just 9 shots and 2 on target with a team as loaded as it looks on paper is way too small. Uh, I mean, can Howe maybe set this team up a little bit better? Can he look at what Brighton were doing with Yel Pedro and Ferguson and try that with Ishak and and Callum Wilson? I mean, I think Ishak is what 6'3", maybe even 6'4". And I'm trying to think of him in a duel versus Billy Gilmore. Who do you think is going to win that battle? I think it actually would have given Brighton a lot of fits had they tried something like that, especially playing them off together. And Ishak can actually he has a lot of not just pace to him. He's clever on the ball. He's like silky. Just that would have I think that would have actually been really hard for Brighton to stop. And instead, we didn't necessarily see that. We saw Ishak getting the ball and he was isolated. He never really had any kind of help next to him. And I think that hurt them. But another thing too is they obviously missed Sven Botman. Uh, and, because Botman, he's not I'm not gonna call him Ruben Diaz and Virgil van Dijk, as far as, where they are, I guess, in caliber, but at least, in terms of how important they are to each team's success, he is in that category. Because when he plays, Newcastle do not lose. They don't lose games. I think he's lost 4 games since joining them, entirely. So his miss obviously is massive here, and, they do have a couple injuries, out. They don't have, Joe Willock, yet to join. He can maybe kind of do something. I am kinda curious to see if maybe, what can you do with Anthony Gordon to make him work? Or I mean, is Harvey Barnes a better goal scorer threat? To be honest, maybe you should try to play him instead. There's so many times when Anthony Gordon had a chance to make a good run to the box and made the wrong run. And I just think he's not used to doing that. I think he's used to being a winger, not necessarily being an inside forward. So Barnes makes a little bit more sense. Can you turn Gordon into a left back or a fullback? Something basically what Andrew Robinson is, a Liverpool. Uh, Barnes doesn't necessarily have a good defensive work rate. At least I noticed that for City, but maybe you can kind of coach that into him. How has been proven to coach people into being in different positions. You can think back to what he did with Joe Linton, and going back to Joe Linton, the only real difference that we've seen is Tonali has come into the side, and that's benched Sean Longstaff. And Longstaff, maybe he's not necessarily good enough, on the ball, but without it, he makes Newcastle so much different. Uh, Newcastle, he was honestly, he was up there for player of the season for them last season. Trippier as well. Nick Pope, I guess, would have gotten a mention, but Longstaff was really, really important. He did a lot of things that didn't necessarily show up in the stat sheet that led to a lot of their wins, and I think they're missing that. To be honest, I don't necessarily know if his legs are heavy and maybe he's tired, but it looks like Joe Linton is tired. So I don't necessarily think the issue is it's just Tonali being in the side instead. But the chemistry just isn't necessarily working, and so can Hal kind of fix this a little bit better? Um, and is another thing that's worth saying is Nick Pope has started to stand out in some of these games, and it's not necessarily good. Both his performances and versus the keepers he's been going against. Versus City and Brighton, they know that they can pass it back to their keeper, and they know it's not going to be a turnover. They know they're going to be able to keep possession. I don't think Newcastle can do that. So I think his ability on the ball has been an issue, and then. You think back, how did they lose to? They lost to City with an Alvarez shot from distance. Pope maybe could have done better. They lost to Liverpool in the same kind of fashion, and they lost here, or the second goal that beats them here is also a shot from distance. So he's not making the saves either. So I am wondering if it was a mistake not to test the waters with David Raya the way Arsenal have. But anyways, that's just kind of speculating. And then we'll move on to Tottenham and Burnley. A couple games here where a team scored 5. So we'll spend a little time talking about them. With Son being the hero, hat trick Son, uh, and they do on to beat Burnley a 5-2, where they actually give up the first goal. Funny enough, so Foster scores, and then it's Son, and then Romero, and then Madison with a really nice a goal again, second week in a row, and then Son tacked on 2 after that, and then Brownhill. Son not only a hat trick, Son scored 3 different goals, so with both feet. is worth kind of highlighting as well. And then, with the leading off story, I think is Andre Ball continues to be fun. But it is the first time this season where they felt a little adversity, and they did well to respond to it. They knocked out of the EFL Cup in the midweek. Anja played a very weak subpar 11, to be fair, uh, but and they started this game, giving away an early goal to Burnley. So how were they able to respond? And no panic, and they were able to respond, led by their captain, Captain Son, who's had an interesting kind of season to start. Uh, he Captain Hattrick, I guess we can call him now, playing in a central role, instead of maybe on the left wing, and that allowed, Solomon, to get a start instead, and he certainly didn't look out of place. Last week or so, I was wondering, what are they gonna do if Richarlison either can't lead the attack himself, or if maybe Richarlison, can't go, maybe he gets a knock, and maybe the answer is this. Maybe we'll see Son is right here more, and maybe Son is their Kane replacement. I don't really know. It definitely worked here. Uh, the first again, it didn't start off that great though. They do concede the first goal with Foster, and Burnley win the ball off Spurs in kind of the far right side of the field, and they do well to kind of play through them. Spurs are pressing them. Josh Cullen gets the ball in the middle of the field and quickly passes it to the left back, who's completely open in space, and then he plays a lovely ball ahead to Lucas Kolieshu, making a run behind Pedro Porro and Christian Romero. And Romero can maybe get tighter to help Porro, but he doesn't. And Kolieshu is stronger than Porro to beat him on the ball, and then squares the ball into the box that Foster finishes. And it's a nice goal by Burnley that can showcase a little bit what they can do. Um, but it doesn't last that long because Spurs will go on to tie it with Son in the 14th minute, and Pedro Porro makes amends here with a very lovely ball over the top to Son, making a run, kind of splitting the two Burnley center backs. Not the first time that Pedro Porro has a really good ball over the top. I'll get to that again. Um, Burnley are playing a high line here, like a really high line, and it was way too easy for a team to beat. And you admire company trying to play this way, but it could sometimes you understand a little bit why clubs don't. Why clubs do take a little bit more pragmatic approach because if you don't have the center backs that can handle it, you can get exposed. And it's on exposed to them here. Son collects the ball and passes it outside to Solomon, joining him, and then Solomon plays the ball back to Son, who has a very nice touch to collect it before getting to the right side of the field and chipping it into the net with his right foot, and it's a very clever finish, it's a number 9 finish. Um, Burnley also isn't in the worst shape after Son passes it to Solomon, but I think it's Dara O'Shea. He completely gets lost in what he's supposed to do. And he tries to basically shift towards Solomon, but isn't necessarily close enough to do anything, and that just leaves Son wide open in the box. And it's a heads up play by Solomon, to make the same run to join Son in the beginning, and then you're making the right decision to pass it to Son. And then I've got a chance for Tottenham with Madison. Nothing really comes of it, but just an example of how Spurs can strike when the space is limited. Because Madison goes to the wing to receive the ball, and then squeezes a ball into the penalty area to I think it's Sarr, who lays it off to Madison, continuing in his run, and then Madison tries to beat Trafford from outside, and Trafford's able to stop this, but it doesn't. Only this time, Madison is able to get him in the second half. But the slip pass that Madison plays in the beginning to find Sarr is elite. It seems like there are two Burnley players that are pretty tight on him, and Madison still finds a way to squeeze this ball through. And this is what a legit number 10 can do to the side. This is not something that Spurs have had, in my opinion, at least in midfield for a while, since maybe Modric. Uh, well, maybe I guess you could Ericsson in his heydays, but he seems to be that kind of player. Um, and then we get to halftime, or close to the end of the half. It was still only 1-1, and then Spurs get the breakthrough with Christian Romero, and this is a wonderful hit from Romero. But I feel like Burnley are doing a decent job to hang in this, and then it's just they almost go in level, and they just can't defend a corner kick. Spurs recycle the ball, and then Madison kind of fires in across that. Sarr and Kulishevsky kind of go hard for a 50-50 challenge, keep the ball in the box, and then it just kind of finds Romero in the box, and he has a beautiful strike that Trafford can't do anything about. So we go into halftime, and it is only 2-1, and then Burnley have a chance to at least kind of do something with Brownhill. But I want to highlight this because Koleoshu again has a nice little run to set this up, and he shows a little bit what he can do with the ball. He shows some pretty good wheels here. Nothing comes from it, but it's just something to kind of highlight and remember. And then Spurs really do kind of break this open a little bit with James Madison, And again, Burnley were kind of in the game, and then this broke it completely open. Where Spurs force Trafford to make a poor decision on the ball. He tries to pass it to a teammate on the touchline. He's immediately under fire by Udogie, pressing him high, and he's able to force a turnover, win the ball back, and he feeds Madison the ball in the middle of the pitch, top of the box, and Madison basically tells Trafford to pick the ball out of his net with a very lovely strike from distance. Uh, and Trafford did save one earlier, but he wasn't able to do it here. But I mean, this is Burnley's kind of undoing. There's no reason to necessarily try to. It's one thing to try to play from the back and try to play safe or try to keep possession, but sometimes the better option is to just kind of boot it out of bounds, boot it away, and they get caught a little bit here. And then Burnley did have a chance with Foster a little bit after that, and a decent chance to get back into the game where Anduane finds a pocket of space and receives the ball and then threads a through ball to Foster, making a run behind Van de Ven. And then Romero does just enough to recover to maybe at least force us to be as hard as possible. Foster's effort can't beat Vicario, and it is a good save. Foster maybe could do better here. If he does, Burnley are back in the game. And then instead, immediately Son tries to basically closes it out, making it 4-1. And it may be a great example of how quickly close moments can swing games. Burnley very close here, and then instead, what happens is Burnley are very close to pitching this off Mickey Van de Ven like 3 or 4 times, and Van de Ven is strong enough to just kind of power through a couple challenges, keeps the ball, gets it to a teammate, and then that's where Spurs are allowed to break. Solomon then gets his ball. Solomon again. And he squares it in the box where Son has a wonderful first finish for his second. But Burnley get a little bit distracted by Madison making a forward run ahead of Son. And I think they lose sight of Son a little bit, delay in the running behind, and it is a very good finish. And Solomon had a little purple patch last year in February for Fulham, and we didn't really see him again. And he continues playing like this. Fulham are going to regret giving him away. 2 assists, playing the role that Son usually plays. And if nothing else, maybe they have cover for if something happens to Son. I mean, it is just versus Burnley, but I like the vision and weight of passes that he showed. I also he seemed to be in the right positions. He was making runs forward when Son was doing it. He was able to offer a little support. So I liked it. And last year for Fulham, he showed he has the ability to have a good shot on distance from him as well. And then the Spurs close it out with the fifth goal. Here, Madison just kind of showing off, and Spurs are basically playing keep away. Madison, has dropped deep for the ball here, and he's just kind of poking around with the center backs, doing some one-touch football. And it basically does seem demoralizing. And then he swings the ball to Pedro Porro, who's completely unmarked. And then Porro, from a central midfield kind of position, plays a very lovely ball over the top that Son is able to make a well-timed run onto. He again gets behind the Burnley center backs way too easy, and from there, Son just basically passes it into the net with his left foot, and it is this hat trick. And then Burnley were able to get one kind of late with Brownhill. Um, but I mean, first time maybe he's facing a little adversity. They did well. They did well to come back. Obviously, I mean, 21 shots and 11 on target is doing quite well. 3 big chances for Spurs, 2 big chances for Burnley though. They at least forced some questions, at least you can say. But I mean, you have to start with Son being kind of the hat trick hero. But another thing too is just Madison was stellar again, and he just continues to be stellar. And the fact that Spurs got him for I think 35 million or so is maybe signing of the summer, given at least value for in product and production. But Madison can also have this kind of free will and play everywhere in midfield because of what Spurs have behind them. I mean, Spurs are allowed to be way more fluid than maybe they have been in the past. In the past, it was only Kane that was able to kind of do stuff like this. Uh, but I mean, he has freedom like this because of what's behind him in Sarr and Basuma. And I think what sets this team apart from the past ones is how those two CMs in midfield are dual winners, but also good on the ball and can be threats near the box. And just they can keep the ball from being pressed as well, and they make good progressive passes to feet as well. It doesn't. Another thing too is it didn't feel like Spurs have had fullbacks like Udogie and Porro in the past. No, they had Porro last year, but it wasn't necessarily coming out. Porro looks a better player already. I mean, it's 3 assists come from the fullbacks. It's worth saying that as well. And then leading off, you have to go with Son being the striker, and it, I don't know if this was played because Richarlison having the knock or not. Richarlison did score in the midweek in that game, and they had brought in Brendan Johnson. So I don't know what the idea is to do with him. But maybe Son can't do this every week, but I don't understand why he can't. He has a good understanding of how to hold the ball up. He looks strong. He's got good link up play. He can make runs in central areas, obviously, but he can also finish with his left and right foot, as we've seen. And this was impressive. And we need to remember he didn't necessarily have his best season last season. I think he started off injured, and then when he came back, he had that hat trick versus Leicester, and then he basically broke something near his eye. Uh, he was just never really able to have a lot of consistency last season. But the year before, I think he was either basically the Golden Boot winner, tying Salah, or he was close to it. Uh, it's possible Spurs are able to basically get that Son back, and if so, that immediately does change a little bit how they can be going forward. Most definitely. And again, what a way for them to bounce back. And then how do they fit Brendan Johnson into this? That'll be something we have to see as well. And I don't necessarily know how serious to take Spurs, but it doesn't really matter. They're where they are in the table. I think they're 10 points in 4 games, and we get to maybe see how serious to take them because September 4th, in a couple of weeks, when the EPL returns, is the London Derby, I believe, with Arsenal. So that's certainly something to look forward to. And then with Burnley, there are some positives with Kolieshu and Foster. Some good and bad though. I mean, Foster can maybe do better on that chance in the second half, and Kolieshu, I think he showed good moments with the ball, but I didn't think he was offering enough without it. I think he needs to make some runs forward to just kind of offer an outlet, especially when you're being pressed and you're trying to play from out the back. You need to have some kind of outlet to go upfield that at least pushes the back line to go back a little bit because in the second half they were just kind of getting smothered a little bit with the ball. But the problem is defensively they are a mess, and a lot of the issues that hurt them was Aston Villa showed up again this week. Just not being able to mark people, making disguised run into the box. You're trying to play possession from the back and being sloppy, turning it over, gifting away chances, and playing a high defensive line that's way too easy for teams to run behind. You can't do this with slow center backs. Last week, company tried a back three. This week, a traditional back four. Same story. And the kind of quality balls over the top as well that Pedro Porro is playing, it's probably not something that company's team saw last season in the championship, to be honest. And so an adjustment period is needed and maybe understood, but it needs to be fixed soon. Uh, 16 shots is definitely positive, but only 4 on target is worth kind of saying as well. And again, it's a bit like with Vela. It's brave for company to play this way, but it also carries risk. And if you don't have players to be capable of playing that back line, it is you're feeding I guess meat to the wolves. I guess you could maybe say. But another thing that's kind of noticeable is there were a few times when Burnley were able to play through Spurs, kind of pressing them and only instead of like looking to go forwards, they went backwards, and that allowed Spurs to invite even like either the same amount of pressure or even more. And you often hear Pep Klopp and De Zerbi, pretty much any Arteta, any kind of you'll probably see here Ogni or Ange in a future post game kind of say the same thing where they talk about being brave on the ball. Thomas Frank would be another, and what that means is when you're being pressed, you need to think about how you can hurt a team going forward, not necessarily going back, not being safe. Because usually when a team is pressing you, they want you to play it safe. They want you to go backwards or sideways because that is where they can break on you. It's a bit like in basketball versus full court press. The way to beat it is to look to score immediately once you pass half court, not to recycle possession top of the key, unless you're kind of running out the clock. I guess that's probably the best way to describe it. Well, I mean, they were close into this. That before that Madison goal, there was a chance to make it, 2-1 or 2-2, and just the Foster effort kind of let them down. But it does feel like they're at least they're closer than the other teams. I guess I could say maybe Sheffield getting Cam Archer changes that a little bit. But I mean, none of the promoted teams have been able to get a win yet. That's worth kind of saying that as well. They're all kind of struggling. Um, and then we move on to Man City and Fulham. The This one was the most Holland-centric game I think we can imagine because not only, let's see, not only did Holland get a hat trick, what was it? I think he had 4 passes all game. I think he only had 11 touches total. He did have a couple key passes. It's worth kind of saying as well. And it was a good week for Haaland. He was announced the UEFA Player of the Year, and he announced himself by scoring a hat trick the next game. And City do win comfortably, but it's how they get the second goal that maybe gives warrants a little controversy. I can't necessarily say. I mean, the lineup was interesting. No Grealish, so Jamie Doku immediately got to get a start, as did Foden. And what's interesting is Doku started on the right side, Foden on the left, and they basically switched mid-game, or maybe in like after 20 minutes, because what was happening in the first half was not working. It was a weird game because I want to say it was until like the 30th minute or so, Man City did not have a single shot on goal at all. And then out of nowhere, they get the goal, and basically I think they only had 5 shots on goal the entire game, and that was the actual goals that they scored. I think they had 7 shots total. It was a weird game. They went about their business in a bit of a strange way. Uh, uh, the first goal comes to Alvarez, and basically, Holland just kind of abuses Diop, trying to mark him. Tim Ream kind of loses Holland as well, and then Holland gets him behind and squares the ball in the box to Alvarez, making a run, joining him. Simple finish to Alvarez. Alvarez likes doing this. He likes kind of making runs, shattering Holland. And then Tim Ream is able to at least make it interesting, make it 1-1. Where yeah, I think it's a corner kick. Jimenez is able to one-time a shot at Ederson. Ederson kind of parries it, and Tim Ream is making a run to the back post and able to make it count. And it looked like maybe it was going to be 1-1 at halftime, and then Ake was awarded a goal. And this is the controversy. It's just a City corner kick, an Ake header, and it goes in. But on replay, you can clearly see that Akanji is offsides when he's jumping on the ball and he's distracting Leno. And then, given what we've seen in the last couple of seasons or so, this isn't given. So, but here it was. I think there's been an announcement actually saying that they shouldn't have given it. Uh, and then we have Holland getting the third in the 58th minute. It's just kind of a Rodri pass to Alvarez, who run times the ball towards Holland's way, and then Tim Ream makes a mess of things again. He's trying to block the pass, but instead he deflects it onto Holland's path. Holland finishes, and it's a good strike into the net, to be honest, and it's not something that he was doing versus Newcastle. And then Holland gets the hat trick with the PK, or gets a second one with the PK, and Holland scores it. But really, this is all about Alvarez. Akanji has a nice ball over the top that finds Alvarez making a clever run to get in behind Diop. Bream is too focused on Holland to help out, and Diop brings Foden down, and then Holland puts it away. Holland did miss a PK last week, so there's worth saying that as well. And then he gets the fifth one in like the 93rd minute. Sergio Gomez has come on at this point and has a little nice 1v1 ability, and gets to the byline and squares the ball into the 8-yard area that Holland is waiting for and pounces. Uh, this was a very, very weird game. I mean, City 2.2 xG, 7 shots and 5 on target. Fulham 6 shots and 4 on target. City with probably what you would expect, 68% of the ball. Fulham 32. City with 656 passes, 89%. Fulham with 271. That is probably what you would expect. Fulham without a João Paulina is worth saying as well. But with Man City, you need to touch on a little bit what Alvarez his role in the team is, because it's hard to identify what he is. Like, he lining up as a midfielder, but he's really not being a midfielder. He's almost like second striker, and he's not doing what Kevin De Bruyne would do. But in some ways, that's helping out because he's recognizing when Haaland draws attention, there's an opportunity for him to make runs kind of unmarked. He's getting into the box and he's finishing chances. He keeps scoring whenever he plays. And it's going to be interesting to see how Mateus Nunes from Wolves works out. It's someone that Pep has glown about for years since his side faced Sporting in the Champions League. So it is a bit like Liverpool and Gravenberch, just someone that they saw was finally available. That's been on their roster list for a little bit, that they decided to move for. But the way that the way that Gunnigan was able to kind of create a special role for himself last season, I am a bit surprised. Someone that can be a deep midfielder for early build-up and then to kind of be a second striker in the box in the final third. It feels like Bellingham would have maybe suited that role a little bit more. And Bellingham is just flying for Real Madrid, and it is interesting that City decided to not opt for that. And they've gone for Mateus Nunes. I think last season I was kind of comparing him to considering him as maybe being a Bellingham alternative, and maybe City have done that as well. So we'll see. We'll see how this works. At least for Wolves, he was played out wide. a little bit more. Last season when he was playing in the middle, it wasn't necessarily working, but Wolves, it's a different cat than necessarily here. But another thing we're saying is he didn't necessarily have goals in him, so definitely he has good ball potential. So he'll be hard to get the ball off. That Pep will definitely like that, but he wasn't really a good passer with Wolves. I remember that being kind of an issue. So we'll see. We'll see how that works out. And then, it was a weird game. Jared Doku gets his debut, and not really a lot to write home about. There were a couple times when he did, get inside, did kind of get past someone, but there wasn't really anything to, other than like try to cross the ball. There wasn't really anything open. He did a lot of good defensive work. It's worth saying that. I guess you could say. And then Holland's hat trick is very funny because he has 17 touches and 4 of 6 passes. He almost has more goals than he does passes, which Pep would have absolutely loved. And then with Fulham, Yao Polina was set to join Bayern, and then you forced to stay. It was a very weird Friday, following this saga. But I think Bayern had all summer to sign this player, and to wait 2 weeks to then force a move, force Will Fulham's hand, making it impossible to get a replacement. I think it's Fulham were in their right to deny this, and you maybe have upset the player, but I think it's worth it to take that risk because losing him on deadline day is asking you to go down. I think this team is set to go down without some kind of help, maybe in January. And you just see what it's like when he's in the side versus when he's not. It's a big issue. So there are two ways to look at this. 30-minute City didn't have a shot on them. Foden was looking dangerous, but that was really about it. Maybe you're unlucky to go in where it's not 1-1. But another thing to say is Fulham with Paulinho drew Arsenal, and Fulham without Paulinho gave up 40 shots to Brentford and Everton combined and shipped 5 to City. You're also missing, Calvin Bassey was forced to kind of miss here. They started the game with Tom Carney, and he had to go out to someone named like wasn't Luke Thomas. It was some player I had never heard of before, Luke something. So they were unlucky in that respect as well, and just Fulham seemed to be unlucky at the moment, just in general. I didn't necessarily think Tim Ream has looked that great since he's returned from his injury, and Calvin Bassett did look quite good versus Arsenal. Red card, or kind of ignoring the red card because I think that was kind of harsh, uh, and I think they're missing Tosin. Diop is not really a good partner for Tim Ream. Tosin has a little bit more pace to him, better on the ball as well. So I think they'll be improved at least when they get him back. And we'll have to see how Jimenez and Adama work out for them. And then we'll move on to Liverpool and Aston Villa. Liverpool will go on to win 3-0 thanks to Dominic Szoboszlai. Matty Cash own goal. I kind of credit Nunez, but because he should have buried this anyways. But it is an own goal. And then Salah gets the third. And speaking of Salah, there was some solid drama on deadline day, and he puts that aside and performs well again. He could have had a little bit more than this. He was getting in behind Villa's high line for fun, and Trent was finding him for fun. And the game recap note I had was press pool are back. Liverpool Liverpool were able to just kind of win the ball back in a way that I just haven't seen in a very long time. But another thing too is they also weren't nearly as exposed at the back as they've been recently. So the little tweak that Klopp made in this game worked really really well. And then they did some business. They didn't get the number 6 that I was looking at, but they did bring in a hybrid midfielder. And you kind of seeing the way that Klopp played at Villa, what kind of line it up, you can maybe see a little bit what Klopp's kind of thinking to do because Alexis, Sloboslai, and Trent all kind of rotated and were fluid sixes in this game. And Trent basically played a new position entirely, which I'll get into. I mean, kind of the setup really was Matip, kind of Gomez and Robinson, and then Trent and Alexis, the 3-2-2 or 3-2-2-3 that we've seen. That's not really anything different. But sometimes around like maybe the I don't know 10th minute or so, you started to see Matip go to the touchline, Robinson go to the touchline, Gomez be centrally, and Trent drop into centrally as they had a high back line. As you can best really do this with Gomez because Gomez has a lot of pace to him, as does Trent. And this was they moved to a back four where Trent was almost a center back, and this really gave Villa fits. And I mean, going into this game, I was worried because no Virgil van Dijk, no Kanate. I was fearing, someone like Watkins making a run behind, Matip, being a really big issue, and instead they actually were able to limit being open as they have in recent games. And then with Villa went with something interesting as well. It was like it looks like a It was hard to it looked like a 3 back in the beginning, but it was really a 4-4-2. So Konza was almost playing at right back. Matty Cash was basically a midfielder, a right winger almost. They had Diego Carlos Torres and Digna, and Digna was going forward, and it did basically it turned into a back three, at least in the beginning. I think the idea was to get Digna and Cash really, really forward, to try to overload Liverpool out wide, where they figured maybe Liverpool would be vulnerable, and it wasn't able to come off. They also losing Diego Carlos, I think, really did hurt what Emery wanted to do as well. But Dominic Szoboszlai gets the first goal, and it's just kind of a follow up off a corner kick. It's a screamer into the net, and it is interesting how one thing I've noticed is a lot of teams are kind of doing this where they're kind of putting a guy outside the box where he's not being marked. I think more and more teams are so worried about winning that first ball, they're not recognizing how to stop the second ball, and the second ball just kind of falls to Szoboszlai here. There's a goal versus it might have been Bournemouth for like Reece Nelson scored to actually help Arsenal win the game, and a similar thing kind of happened. He was standing outside basically top of the box where he was completely unmarked. Bournemouth were more worried about the first ball, and it came to Reece Nelson, and he kind of had a similar hit. And it's just to me, it's just nice to see a midfielder have a good strike on the ball again, because Keita and Henderson were not able to do this. But I'm going to get to the tactical note. So Liverpool's again 3 center backs were occupying the entire width of the field, and that allowed Trent to kind of play a little different. So he didn't. Trent was not an inverted fullback, as they've kind of said, where he's a fake fullback and he goes back to being a fullback. Instead, he was doing a little bit what Pep's done with John Stones, where he was basically a central midfielder who was filling into the center back spot at times, and that was given Liverpool basically a four back when they were trying to, and that made Villa. It really made it hard for Villa to try to press them. But basically, Trent was able to just completely control the game from a deeper position, and man, did he spray the ball out really really well. Uh, and they weren't really nearly as vulnerable as they've been in the past. But another thing that was happening was they were really fluid in their positions. I mean, again, Szoboszlai, Alexis was sometimes being the pivot, sometimes Curtis Jones was kind of being in the pivot, and you saw a lot of fluid movement and motion. It was if you're trying to man mark this team, it's you're not going to be able to do it. Um, and in the past, it seems like teams have been able to exploit when Liverpool have been really really open. And a good example of this is, Villa think they have a chance here, where it seemed like they were able to kind of break through Liverpool's pressure. Douglas Luiz sends a ball over the top that to Diaby. Matip kind of runs to close off, and Diaby is able to square a ball to Watkins. But Trent's in that central position to run in front of Watkins and block him from reaching the ball. And then Szoboszlai does well to run back and kind of avoid the danger. And then another note I have is Diaz was able to get free a couple of times where a couple of really good looks came from, again, Alexander Arnold getting the ball from the center back position and just switching it over from the other side of the field, like Pirlo like. And again, nothing really came from it, but it was you saw what Diaz doing well to be an outlet, but you also saw how wide Liverpool were able to make the pitch, and that was giving Villa a lot of fits. And then Emery loses Diego Carlos, and that just completely changes how they wanted to play. And then we get the second goal with Nunes or Cash. Uh, and again, this comes from Trent kind of occupying that center back role. Matip goes out wide, and then he kind of plays him deeper, and it's harder to press him, and he's able to kind of dictate the game a little bit here. And so what happens is he does the ball over the top that Salah's able to run onto, and then Salah kind of uses his right foot to cross the ball into Nunes, and Nunes maybe could do better here to beat the keeper because he absolutely banks us off the post. Basically takes paint off the post and it just flies off Cash to go in. But the cheek thing here is Trent fakes Villa's back line with a fake pass, and he fakes like he's going to go backwards. Maybe he's going to run backwards or pass it backwards, and then he immediately switches and passes the ball to Salah. And that little hesitation, it fools Luca Digne, and then it fools Paul Torres. Paul Torres did not enjoy having to deal with Salah and Nunes running behind him all game. And that was a really big issue. Um, I mean, Villa did have a chance with McGinn, where Liverpool I think were in a good position, but Joe Gomez slipped, and that allowed Villa to get a chance. And then there was a really big chance with Diaby and Watkins. And there's one time when like Salah really wasn't marking anyone, and there's kind of a switch of play from the right to the left side. Digna gets the ball free in space. Trent can't close down to close Digna in time. The ball's fired in the 6-yard box, and no one in Villa can connect. But this was really close. And then basically, Liverpool had a chance to really close this off with Nunez, where he does really well in everything but the finish. But he also shows Trent after. So he shows for Trent. Then after getting the ball, he kind of lays it off to Sloboshai, who then floats the ball towards Salah, but Salah is clearly offsides, and so Villa know that Salah is offsides. But out of nowhere, Nunez does really well to kind of come sprinting out of nowhere to chase his ball, who is onside, and then Nunez gets the ball, and then because of the only negative here, I guess he has a heavy first touch, so he has to slow down a little bit, and then he plays the ball to Salah, and then Salah onside plays the ball back to Nunez, and then it's kind of a similar effort to the Son goal, but Nunez's chip can't really beat the keeper. Uh, Two ways to look at this. I'm actually a little bit more, a little more, I guess, I don't know what would I try to say? Um, Encouraged. There we go. A little more encouraged saying this because last year there were efforts versus Arsenal and Crystal Palace where Nunez was in on goal and he was just trying to beat the keeper for pace, trying to hit it really hard at him. Here he's at least trying to lift it, and I like it. Doesn't really come off, but at least it's showing he has that in his game. He can lift it if he needs to, another day maybe it does go in. Uh, and then, another chance for Salah after getting behind Liverpool's back line after a really good ball from Trent. That was happening over and over again. Villa were really struggling defending in a high line. They also didn't have any kind of pressure onto the ball, and Liverpool were just having fun. And then to get to the third goal, it just comes from it just comes from a corner kick that the ball is sent in, and Nunes does a really good job to win the header and heads it back post, and then Salah is able to run onto it. And so it's worth adding that Nunes didn't have his best game, but he's still responsible for 2 goals in the end. But I mean, the stats here were bonkers. Liverpool had 633 passes with 91% accuracy. That is as good a number that I think I've seen in a very long time, especially in the post or pre Tiago. Yeah, since Tiago, I guess, has joined the club, because they've had gaudy numbers since with Tiago in the side, but not like this. This was wild. Also, 91% accuracy. Villa were not able to turn them over at all, and they were just having fun. Liverpool also going long a lot. I should have had the long balls. I don't. But I mean, this wasn't just like side to side stuff. I mean, they just absolutely just thoroughly dominated. Another thing too that I saw was they won the ball back. I think six or seven times in Villa's own high end, and they didn't do that a single time last season. And so Liverpool's press was back in a way that I hadn't seen in the past, and it was their passing was back in a way that I hadn't really seen in the past. So a lot of reasons to be really optimistic, to be honest. It is only one game, but we'll have to see. But another thing too that showed up was Nunez playing in versus Gakpo. I think helps us out because he was constantly terrorizing Paul Torres to look to run off his shoulder, and because Torres couldn't really handle himself, and that think that forced help. So that left open someone else in the front line to go 1v1. So that was helping. So Nunez was creating mismatches for others. And another thing too is just if you try to press, that forces you to play a high line, and that allows something to get over the top. And after they got their early goal definitely helped. Maybe Emery wanted to sit in the box all game, and that forced him to kind of change it up a little bit. But Liverpool have versatile midfield in a way that I can't remember anything that I've seen in the Klopp era. So I mean, that is kind of high praise to say, but the way that Schloboschlei and Alexis can move the ball, it's the way Trent was looking in this game. There's a lot of reasons for me to be a little more upbeat than I've been in the past. I have been kind of in a dooms mode. I could still be in a dooms mode because Salah, through all the noise, he gets all he does is get a goal or assist every single game. The Saudi window hasn't closed yet, so there's been reports that they are going to bid something insane, and if they break the Mbappe record or the Neymar record, I definitely I don't want them to sell. But I mean they've basically done enough to basically make Salah a member of the royal Saudi family. So I think I saw something like $400 in wages over the whatever the contract was. But to me, so if nothing else, it does feel like Salah's time at Liverpool might be restricted to just this final season. But if that's the case, I want them to push. I want them to push for the league, push for everything that they can. Go balls in the wall in January. Go get Andre of Fluminense. Really wrap that up. Maybe go get a center back as well. But I wouldn't even, obviously I wouldn't think about selling Salah, even if you sell him next year for only say you only say you're only able to sell him for maybe $100 million. Uh, think about this: you brought him in for 40 million, so you're still making a lot of profit on that. So if FSG is any kind of wits to them, they wouldn't do it. And the only way player I would even entertain replacing him with is Mbappe, and it's not the same player. I don't think Mbappe doesn't have the work rate that Salah has either. And Mbappe plays on the left side. You have number of players that already play on the left side, so I wouldn't do it. No, I would. I'm eating my words maybe a little bit, but I'm saying I would take Salah in this situation over Mbappe, over anyone. I think he's the best player on the right side. Um, and I think the stats maybe show that out. He's been the best player in England since he's arrived. To be straight up. But anyways, but another thing to touch on is Trent played like Pirlo this game. So I do have some stats here. 8 for 12 long balls, 90% pass accuracy, 93 touches, and just so much more in control than last week. I like the idea. I think it's easier for him to go from midfield to the center back. It's less for him having to go all the way out wide. I don't necessarily know how well Matip can do out wide versus an actual attacking winger doing 1v1 stuff. But we'd have to see. I mean, again, this is what Pep was doing with Stones in the beginning. Stones was going back to go into center back, and maybe this will force Trent to have to deal with some crosses. But it's not like he's short. I think he is 6 foot. So I don't know. I really did like this. And I don't necessarily know if it was just kind of a tweak for Aston Villa or what. But Villa were not able to get anywhere near him, and he was just spraying the ball around for fun. And another thing that was fun was Alexis and Slabashai's versatility. Slabashai can play deep if he needs to. He's got amazing ball retention, and he can be a passer. But not only that, he's an engine. He can work to win the ball back. He's a pressing engine. Getting these two for under $100 million has been very, very good business. Or under $200 million has been very good business by the club, and they've got a Gravenberch, to add to this, and it seems like he's kind of in a similar fashion. So we'll see how that necessarily works out. But the pressing engine is back. Press pull, look back again. And they were constantly outnumbering Villa in midfield and just kept winning duels. And so again, the only maybe negative here is Trent's played a lot of minutes last season. You're asking him to play like multiple roles every single game, and he's showing signs of tightness already. And so the thinking I'm thinking here is instead of him being a right back now, if you're going to make him to be like this midfielder slash makeshift center back, maybe his replacement isn't going to be a right back at all. Maybe it is Stefan Bacic. And maybe Alexis' replacement is Thiago. So maybe you can kind of do things that way. Maybe you heard someone like Curtis Jones' replacement could be Gravenberch. Maybe that's the way Klopp's kind of thinking. I don't really know. And then the new Nunez chaos continues. And I can live with it because he's chances come when he plays. To be honest, now, whether he converts them or not, yeah. But the attack fires at a different level when he's playing versus Gakpo, in my opinion. And it's not really a negative. This is probably the best game that Robinson has played in this little kind of center back role. He's not being asked to bomb forward all the time, but and he had much better passing in this game. I think he had 90% accuracy, and he was very good defending on 1v1 when he was in possession. Much better than versus Chelsea. But there was a blip where I think in the second half, Aston Villa had a chance to maybe get a goal back, and it was an amazing save by Allison. And it's because it's either Luca Digna or someone. It might be Matty Cash. Matty Cash beats Robertson to the ball on a header, and it's not necessarily because Matty Cash out jumps him. It's just Robinson's kind of a little further ahead, and the ball does go over his head. So being asked to play in this kind of position, you're going to be asked to do that a little bit more. And I mean that is livable. I mean, still a little bit worried with the center back issue. Maybe they can address that a little bit in January. I mentioned Tosin on Fulham. Maybe like they can maybe look at him. I've kind of liked him when I've seen him, but I don't know. We'll have to see. It's still I don't necessarily want to About to go overboard. It is only one game, and I have been doom and gloom until this, because I didn't know how they were going to play without a center back or without a a out and out defensive midfielder if they were playing a 4-3-3. But if they're not going to play a 4-3-3, if they're going to do something a little different like this, you're not going to just need one guy to make up a lot of ground. You're actually going to have guys in place to where the space is actually quite limited. So we'll have to see how this works, going forward. And then with Aston Villa, I think there'll be better days for Musa Diaby, Matty Cash, and Watkins. And it's two away games that's kind of a negative where they've conceded 8 goals combined. And I think the maybe the negative is teams are attacking them in the same manner. But another issue was Liverpool had 90% accuracy, passing accuracy. Villa could not turn them over, and that is not good. And the high line, they just it's 2 games in a row where they've looked really, really poor, playing a high line, and I think not having Tyrone Mings is massive. They lost him versus Newcastle. Paul Torres does not look comfortable playing in a high line at all, and I think basically Liverpool targeted him. They lost Diego Carlos in this game 20 minutes into the game when it was still I think it was only 1-0 at that point. I think that showed up, and so there is some reasons for Emery to be a little concerned here. Um, they're also missing, missing Jacob Ramsey, missing Imran Buendia. There are some players that can come back. I think they signed Clement Longley, who was at Spurs last season. Good passer in his own right, but I don't necessarily think he can play in a high line either. So I don't know. There might have to be ways for Emi Martinez to tweak things. I mean, going forward, they are quite good. I mean, they could have scored multiple goals this game. To be fair, they didn't have a lot of the ball, but they were dangerous when they were able to get their chances. Different day. Maybe Watkins makes a better run, makes a better decision in the box. I mean, Musa Diaby likewise. He was dangerous when he was able to get in the danger moments. It just didn't happen nearly enough. Um, and frankly, they have a good midfield, and Kamara and Douglas Luiz. It was just in this case they were just really outnumbered in a way they don't normally are. And then we'll move on to Chelsea and Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest have started to get actually Chelsea's number. Funny enough, winning they win this game 1-0. I think they drew each other last season. A goal from Anthony Elanga. And I said last week I thought it was maybe a mistake that Cooper didn't use Elanga more. And well, here we go. They sell Brendan Johnson, and they didn't start him this game, but he came on in the second half, and he was immediately rewarded the manager. And there is a wing spot open now for Elanga to at least get more game time. And with Chelsea are a bit of a mess. And they're creating chances. I think they had 20 shots this game, but I think it was only 2 on target. And Jackson seems to be a guy that can create. He can make some runs and create open. He can open spaces for others. But when he's in the box, he doesn't seem to be a poacher. And when you're playing with a singular striker, that can be a bit of an issue. Another thing that was weird this game was to see Enzo kind of played as that double 10 with Sterling. Enzo is being asked to be kind of not only the creator, but to also kind of be a goal scorer. And Gallagher is the guy that's playing with Casado deeper. That to me, I feel like should be switched. Enzo to me, I think is a much better midfielder when he's trying to get the ball from the early phase build up and maybe in the second phase to the final third, not the opposite. And it's been interesting. I feel like I feel like Gallagher is kind of the same way in the other respect. Gallagher is more of an attacking player, more of a final third player than necessarily a build up player and defender. So I've been surprised by that, and that actually is maybe where the goal came from because Gallagher and Casado had a bit of a mess of things. Uh, I mean, it's not like Forest were really that prolific in front of goal. They didn't have many chances. Neither team really had a lot of good chances. But to get to the goal, it's a mess by Chelsea because Forest aren't even really pressing them. Just Gallagher does a dummy, and Casado doesn't recognizes it, and after being surprised, he takes a heavy touch, and then Forest pounce. I mean, Amriani is able to size Thiago Silva up and then plays in a lovely weighted ball through the empty space for Anthony Alanga to run onto. And then he slides it in between Thiago Silva's legs. Colwell can't recover in time. And Anthony Alanga 1v1 versus the keeper, and he puts it away. And that really was it. I mean, Jackson did have a chance, kind of a half chance. Actually, this is maybe more than a half chance. This is pretty good. There's a decent slip ball played by Enzo here. He's in the box. And he finds Jackson. and it's maybe hit too hard, but Jackson just can't control it first time. There was an issue versus Luton Town where I thought Jackson's touch was failing him a little bit, and it showed up here in the box. And the reason that's a problem is because Forrest's volley is still there, and he does well to recover to the ground, and he's able to get to the ball before Jackson gets a second try. This was a pretty good chance. Uh, and then we did see Chelsea make some subs. We saw Palmer come on, Madueke come on, and we saw Mudryk and Matson come on in the second half. Matson and Mudryk had a few moments to maybe do something better, and they also seemed off the page a little bit. Cole Palmer, though, showed something, which I'll get to. And there is the big chance in the 83rd minute, chance of the game. And it's set up well by Cole Palmer. So he plays a good ball ahead for Sterling to run onto, and then Sterling basically runs to the byline, and he's able to cut a ball back inside for Jackson. Jackson's like 3 yards from goal, and the ball is there to be smashed. And Jackson gets his balance wrong. He leans and lunges to the ball instead of staying on his feet, and he rips it over the net. It's maybe not the easiest chance. I don't really think he needs to lean the way he does. I think he could just stay on his feet. But maybe he's kind of worried a little bit with Boley kind of being close to him. I can't really say, but I mean, this is a poacher's kind of goal, poacher's chance, and he needs to bury this. And he doesn't, and at a minimum, he needs to force Turner to make a save, and he just doesn't because he's too close to goal. He's like 3 feet away. Uh, and then there was a chance maybe for Thiago Silva where I think Turner made a save. But I mean, given the chance, they did create 20 chances, but only two on target. Not a lot of clean cut chances. I think actually it was 1.3. Forrest just one. Forrest with 11 shots and two on target. So same shots on target. And it's a massive win for Forrest. But it's kind of funny because they do have Chelsea's number a bit. But also, I think what's funny is when you look at Chelsea, they're kind of built the same way. To be honest, the way their owners have kind of brought in and just completely revamped the squads and made it really hard for the managers to kind of pick a consistent 11. And just to focus on Chelsea for a second, it just seems it's a problem that Sterling is the only one that seems that he can create for them, and I am wondering if Pochettino is setting his team up for success because too often Sterling is being asked to maybe do too much, and when he is able to do something, the only person he can maybe cross something into is Jackson, and Jackson doesn't seem to be a finisher. So I can't necessarily say. Uh, I mean, the passing numbers was quite poor as well, and so I feel like that could immediately be improved by having Enzo and Casado kind of playing together, as opposed to Gallagher. I've been floored by that move. But to Nottingham Forest side first, because they were the team that won it. Two team. Let's see. Again, it's hard not to draw a similarity to both clubs. I mean, Forest. I mentioned how all they've done is revamp their squad left and right, and they signed 7 players on deadline day. I mean, so it's both clubs that have spent boatloads to revamp their squads in different ways, but I feel like they have suffered the same thing where they're both struggling to find some consistency. But they do have consistency over Chelsea. Anthony Elanga and Awani, I definitely think is a positive that they can rebuild, they can build on, and do week to week. It's the second time where I think Elanga hasn't necessarily had a lot of game time, but he's come on and it seems like he's produced every single time. He had that. I think it's his run versus Arsenal that got Awani his goal in that game as well, and he only came on as a bench sub. He had a really good run and cross versus Man United last week. Again, he's only had he's a couple of minutes to come off the bench and prove himself, but he's looking quite good at doing it, and he gets the goal here. Ryan Yates, I guess someone to kind of mentioned. Forest had made a number of midfield signings, but it hasn't affected Ryan Yates, and it just seems he put in a good shift here. He won the ball back a lot, and they don't have the ball a lot, so you kind of need that. And I don't know. Like maybe the negative is they are 100% reliant on teams missing chances for them because they don't have a lot of the ball, and they're just hoping to get a couple breaks on them. So at least in that case, having someone like Anthony Elanga that can immediately break on teams, I don't understand why he's not starting. So we probably will going forward, to be honest. And they've sold Brennan Johnson, so that is it feels they've left open a wing spot for him. And then looking at this, Man United maybe gave up a little bit on here. They've put in a lot of a lot of capital on Anthony, bringing Anthony to the club, and we don't necessarily know if Anthony has an issue or not. It looks like at least Personnel wise, it seems like there's an issue between Ten Hag and Sancho, who would probably be their other right winger. Other than you got Garnacho and maybe Palestri. That could have been a mess up there. And I mean, he looked. I was kind of surprised by that, by them giving it up. They held on to McTominay. They held on to Harry Maguire, and they sold Elanga. And Elanga looked rapid versus Liverpool last season. He's always had pace, and maybe he just didn't have necessarily the work rate. I can't really say. He definitely showed work rate here. It's not you're playing without the ball a lot for Forest. You have to run without the ball. There's no issue there. He has 1v1 ability. He showed some pretty good movement in tight spaces here. He made Mudryk look really silly on the byline in this game. I'm a bit floored a little bit by Man United deciding to let him go. And then with the defense, they did a better job at least, getting guys to mark runners. But I did feel like Chelsea did get behind that often. But when it did happen, it wasn't nearly it wasn't nearly as often as last week versus Man United. But I am still skeptical, though. I mean, this kind of play with this kind of players is sustainable. But they have made 7 signings, and so they brought in additional midfield steel. Chelsea spent 40 million on Andre Santos, and they've already again loaned him out to a different club that Forest is decided to join in. But the big one is Ibrahim Sananga of PSV, a Champions League PSV. He's left a Champions League team to join Nottingham Forest. I don't necessarily know if that's good for the game, as well as Nicolas Dominguez of Bologna. So they brought in like 2 or 3 DMs or CMs. So they're going to be maybe better. At least Sanagre is quite good. So they're going to maybe be improved a little bit on the ball. We'll just see if Cooper allows them to be improved. And they brought in a couple center backs. Muriel of Corinthians, Oma Balmidi of Norwich. I don't really know these players. But they have Niakate and Felipe back fit. They both were on the bench this week, so maybe they won't have to do with Scott McKenna anymore. That alone will improve them, in my opinion. And then if Alwani isn't working out, maybe Chris Wood, he's not working out. They brought in Divock Origi, he's back to the Premier League, and they've also brought in 2 fullbacks, Nuno Tavares, formerly of Arsenal, and Gonzalo Montiel, a loan from Sevilla, who played in the World Cup for Argentina. And so they should be maybe improved a little bit at fullback. So they have certainly strengthened at least as far as caliber wise or a pedigree. We'll just have to see if that pans out. Because again, you're adding 7 players that haven't played yet. How are you going to get them to gel? You made the same issue. You dealt with this last season, and then with Chelsea. Again, the only person I see that can create for them is Sterling, so that's really a big issue. I think it's interesting that they brought Cole Palmer to the club. It feels like Brighton just got Foddy. Maybe you could have tried for him. I know they were trying for Kudus, but it seems you're missing in Cuckoo. Maybe the idea is you can try Cole Palmer on the wing, or I don't know if Cole Palmer can be a 10. Maybe you can try Sterling as a 10. To be honest, it seems Sterling is the only. Why not get him the ball in the center of space and let him create a little bit for you? Try Cole Palmer with Sterling. Maybe that can be a way to kind of get you going a little bit. Because right now they're struggling. They're struggling without Nkunku. I think the idea was to try Nkunku in the beginning. It was a 4-2-3-1. He was going to have Nkunku with Jackson ahead of him, and Jackson was going to make some runs in the head, and then Nkunku was going to enjoy with a little bit of that space that Jackson would have created, and Nkunku would have led to some goals, and then Jackson would have helped with Jackson kind of get some goals, because I think Jackson's struggling not having a number 10 behind him. I mean, there's worth kind of saying that as well. I mean, they've moved to a 3 at the back, and I think that's kind of struggled a little bit with the team. I think they're missing Reece James. I think that I said that last week. That's definitely showing up again. Marlo Gusto is not the same offensive player that Reece James is. That would probably give you some overloads that would help you out as well. So there are a lot of problems for Chelsea. I mean, only have 2 shots on target is definitely a big problem. I think they've been missing or using Levy Colwell. In a weird way, they've almost been asking him to play fullback in some of these games, not necessarily third center back, and I think he's been struggling with that. But another thing too is does Pochettino deserve some blame here by playing some guys out of position? He's been playing Ben Chilwell almost as a winger, not as a fullback or not even as a wing back. Is Ben Chilwell over Mudryk? Though Mudryk's come in and hasn't really done much better either. Matson got a couple minutes, I think, in this game, and then I think he got a couple minutes in the midweek game in the cup game. And apparently Matson didn't necessarily have his best game, but I would maybe try him a little bit more if you're going to stick with this Chilwell kind of being played at this left wing spot. At least give Matson some gaming time, real game time to get some consistency. Because Chilwell doesn't look comfortable doing this. Uh, but another thing too is Jackson. The way that they're playing, Jackson kind of being isolated, he's got to score. And the only one on their team is I think Armando Broja. Maybe when he gets back, you can try them together. I don't know. I mean, again, it's very it's similar to Darwin Nunes to me, where he's getting a lot of chances. He's creating chances every single game. I think he's top three for expected goals, and he's only put one away. And he's I think he leads the league in big missed chances. I think he's got six already. So the two ways to look at that: does one kind of reflect does one kind of follow the other, or does one kind of show hey, eventually something's going to happen where it changes? Getting all those chances, there's eventually they come good for you. There's again the two ways to look at that. If not, or if so, they have a gym because he is getting chances for days. He's just not necessarily putting them away. So just the danger with only playing with one striker. And let's see. Again, if Brocha returns for fitness, I would like to see and find a way to try them together. But that would force you to change a little bit how you've been playing. Definitely, I would like to see Cole Palmer play. I mean, you spent a lot of money to get him off City. There's no reason to not see him try it immediately. And again, Sterling has been so good on the right wing for you. But why not try him as a 10? Just kind of see how that works, and then you'll get Reece James, I think, soon, so that'll help you out too. And we'll move on to Brentford and Bournemouth. This one ends 2-2. A couple of games ending at 2-2 here. Goals from Jensen, Solanke, Brooks, and then and Bremer. And Bremer was kind of the goat in the early second half, and then he becomes the hero. And another thing too is Brentford do go on to get Neil Mopai on loan, a former B. And this was a bonkers game with way more goals than I think I was expecting. But Brentford had a chance to maybe adding more. I think they hit the post three times, and adding Neil Maupay I think is the right fit. This is gonna be interesting, but he hasn't really had a lot of luck at Everton for almost a year, and it's kind of funny they're hitting the post, and he'd probably fit in doing that. But just given the way he was playing at Everton, but I do think it's a good signing. It suits what they need because again, you're only missing Tony for so much. So this at least give you, if nothing else, this gives you at least another body in case something happens to Wiseau or you need to just switch something up in second halves. He's also a former player at the club, so he's it's a familiar environment for him. And it just kind of gives you a little extra security. So maybe we'll see Neil Maupay that looks kind of similar to what he did at Brighton when he was with Potter, because he looked a different player at Brighton than he looked the last year for Everton. And to be honest, the first couple of games for Everton, I didn't think he actually played poor. At least versus Fulham, again, it was one of those things where he was getting into good areas and just he went up against a hot keeper. Maybe he could have done better with the finishing, but he went up against a hot keeper. So I mean, he's going to be he can be reliable for link up play. We'll have to see how this works out. And I mean, they get the goal from Jensen. It's kind of a free kick that goes in. He beats the keeper from a tight angle. But the free kick is caused by Shada. So Shada does well here. He's able to catch Neto out a little bit, and he draws the free kick, and then Jensen beats Neto. And then, unfortunately, Brentford didn't necessarily do that great after getting the goal, because Bournemouth did have a couple chances. There's one by Ryan Christie where he basically dribbles through the whole deep back line. And then they got lucky because Dominic Solanke decided to be a little greedy and took it off Christie before he was able to slot it in. I thought Ben Mee was able to get a debut over Collins. He was back healthy. I thought Ben Mee actually looked a little rusty. So that kind of showed up, and Pennick looked a little was struggling a little bit with the renewed partnership as well. At least in here, Rico Henry. I mean, not Rico Henry. Aaron Hickey didn't look that great on this play either. Just Ryan Christie was able to dribble through three people. Uh, and then there was a chance here for Shada. And this maybe again, this is one of those cases where it's really unlucky because he does everything well here and it just doesn't come off for him. It's the first of three times that Brentford hit the post. And it's a fantastic long ball by Norgard, or just ball over the top that Shada's able to run onto. And he does everything well here, gets the ball first, and Neto's out of his goal, and Shota beats Neto, or he at least he hits the shot, and it hits Neto. And it's a good save by Neto because I think he gets just enough of it to deflect it where it banks off the post outside of it, then going inside of it. And then that miss ended up showing up because just a couple minutes later, Brentford are make a mess of things. Starting with Hickey. Hickey kind of, freaks being pressed, and he decides to just kind of go long. And what happens is Embremo can't really control it. I don't really put this on Embremo. It's a hard ball to control. And then, Bournemouth are able to get the ball back, and Brentford are a little bit out of position here. And Senese just floats a ball over the top to Salake, making a run, splitting Pinnock and Ben Mee. Again, they kind of looked a little bit vulnerable here. And from there, he's able to then cut inside Ben Mee, and he fires one past Feckin. I can't put this on Flecken. And the goal had been coming. There had been a couple of times where Bournemouth had actually, gotten in behind, and then there was a header that Pinnock missed, and then there was maybe a Bournemouth chance towards the end of the first half that Semedo had that was blocked last second. To be honest, it felt like a relatively even game, and then Bournemouth really were outplayed in the second half, where Brentford were really reeling that they didn't have a lead. I mean, especially starting with the Bremen miss in the second half, because I feel like he has to bear this. I mean, maybe it's the only reason he's not an $80 million player. It's a major let off by Bournemouth, and who continue to basically try to give this goal away. Rico Henry does really well to run onto a loose ball, and then squares it across the 8-yard area where Bremer is free, and just he misaims it. It goes too wide. Flecka has a save on Christie, and then Weissa has a miss. And this is maybe harder than in Bremer, though I think Weissa made it harder than it should have been. But it is a good chance nonetheless, and it's a really good play between Janelt, Ricky Henry, and Weissa. Playing off one another to get free down the wing. Henry plays a similar ball into the box that he played to in Bremer, and Weissa takes a touch and then tries for the corner, and it's denied by the goalpost. But he does the kind of a back touch. He makes this a little harder than maybe it should. It is quite clever because he does kind of fool the defender. That maybe opens up the chance, and he's got some close control with his touch here, and he gets the shot off. It just kind of it's unlucky that it goes off the post, but it is close, and it's the second time they hit the post, and then they hit the post for the third time with Lewis Potter, and this may be offsides, but I can't really tell. But it's another example of how quick Weiss's feet can be. He has another really nice clever turn here. Just looking at his close control, he's got to be a nightmare for defenses. So there's at least something to showcase there. And then Brentford, just move the ball from the center of the field to the right side. That Impremo, he plays in Onyeka, who fires the ball across goal. He's maybe going for goal, but I can't really say. But it works out because Lewis Potter is on the back post, and I have no idea how this misses the goal. It banks off Potter's leg. He's a foot away from the goal, and he hits it somehow across the goal, and it banks off the post. And then Bournemouth get the going ahead goal, and Brentford make a mess of things here as well. I said part two. It's Brentford have a long throw in, and Bournemouth defend it, and then the ball gets to Onyeka, who passes it to Jensen, who has an uncharacteristic poor touch, and then from there Bournemouth break. But Rico Henry is able to just sprint back, and he's there to put out this fire. And he gets to the loose ball, and then he just mishits it back to the keeper. And then Tavernier is able to carry it to the box and lay it to Brooks, who dummies a Flecken, Flecken goes to ground, and Brooks finishes it. But it is two bad errors from two guys that otherwise had stellar games to that point. But another thing too is to take nothing away from Brooks, who has a cheek kind of cut to get past Flecken, and finishes the chance. And to be honest, it is awesome to see. Given what he's been able to go through. And he doesn't look like a charity case. He looks like he's back to his full health, and he's helping them get some points here. And then it looked like Brentford had really let the slip away. And then Thomas Frank did something different. He switched to a back three, and I think the idea was to get some width from the wingbacks. But another thing he did was he moved Lewis Potter, I think, to number 10. He moved it a little bit more centrally to allow there to be kind of an anchor to maybe thread something in to attackers in the front. Nothing really came off here, but that was just interesting to kind of see. And then they finally do get the tying goal within Bremer. He had that miss in the second half and didn't phase him. This is a world class goal because he spins. He has a really clever spin and first touch after a ball kind of played over the top. And the only thing you can say here is the defender Kirkretz really messes up by going to ground. I think if Kirkretz stays on his feet, maybe this goal doesn't happen. But instead, he takes a risk, and then Bremer kind of it fools him a little bit, spins on the ball, and he gets one-on-one on the keeper and finishes it. And his start to the season is on fire. I think he's top 3 in the league for expected goals, and he started to put chances away. Now he'll have that miss, and Shota had that miss. I mean, this could have been put away a lot easier than it was. Brentford had 21 shots and 7 on target. Bournemouth with 12 and 5. 5 big chances for Brentford, 3 for Bournemouth. This was a way more open game than I was expected, to be honest. And Brentford don't normally win the possession game, and they kind of smother the ball thanks to what they were doing in the second half, 61% to 39. And decent passing numbers for Brentford, 402, 83%, to Bournemouth, 224, 72%. Again, that's not 400 is good for Brentford. They're sometimes kind of lower because they do like going direct and they like kind of playing a little bit without the ball. So that was good to see. I mean, some positives. Norgard and Jensen, their delivery on the long ball is getting better and better to me. And it's good that Shot is learning how to time his runs and get behind these lines. And then in Bremer is close to being a complete attacker as there is. And what a goal to get this side a deserved point. And I do feel like I'm not the only maybe negative is that miss earlier. And I do think that maybe is the one bugaboo because he has a great touch. He's very good 1v1. He's got the pace to make runs in behind. He's strong at winning the ball in the air, given his size. He has good hold to play. He's also quite strong, lower body, and he can play like and find some teammates as well. We saw that versus Fulham. So I mean, he does sort of remind me of Mane in a lot of ways, even with the weird finishing. Mane was people don't think of Mane as being a poor finisher, but he kind of was. He was like a reaction finisher. When he had time to really think about what to do, he sometimes made a meal of things. And the reason why he scored all those goals is he was given a lot of chances. I don't necessarily know if you could maybe do the same thing if you put him on a different team. I can't really say, but at least right now, Brentford are liking him being on their team, and he's quite good for them as well. And yeah, it is good for them to at least get something here because they doubled Bournemouth on shots basically. It is a home game, and to get nothing would have been quite poor, especially to hit the post 3 times. Uh, and I did like seeing that three at the back that Frank went with. Sometimes we don't always kind of see that from him. That we did say it last season when that seems to be kind of his thing when he's chasing games, which is kind of funny enough because he pushes the wing backs to be kind of wingers and that kind of moves. I think he finds a way to get an additional attacker to play alongside the striker. Last year it was De Silva or Damsgaard. This game it was Lewis Potter. Uh, but we don't really see it that often, and it is kind of funny how we often do see a 4-3-3 versus kind of the quote unquote lesser sides because I think Frank thinks he can press them into mistakes. But it wasn't really working out this game. Or I guess you could maybe say it was. Just they weren't taking their chances. And then with Bournemouth, I mean, not a whole lot of positives. I mean, Solanke continues to kind of be good for them. I thought Semena was struggling to get into the game. Just they seem to be short in midfield. To be honest, and it is good to see David Brooks scoring, and they got Tavernier back for fitness, but they're definitely struggling in midfield. You can definitely say that, and if they probably get 3 points here, to be honest, if Kirkowitz doesn't go to the ground. So, but Kirkowitz has been a good signing since joining, so I can't really go at him. And then I'll move on to Crystal Palace and Wolves. See how we're doing for time. Crystal Palace do go on to win. Oh, it's not that bad. Crystal Palace do go on to win. 3-2 in again another wild game that I just I was not really expecting to be honest. And at least in the first half, it wasn't that wild. Goals from Edouard, Wang then tied it, and then Eze had a wonderful second goal, and then Edouard and then Cunha was able to make it at least something interesting a little bit towards the end. The game was already over, but the leading off story was Eze being called up in the midweek by Gareth Southgate for England duties. And I think it's good for Southgate because I feel like this is not only well deserved, this has been long overdue. I've been kind of surprised we haven't seen this in the past. And to be honest, normally we don't see this. We don't see clubs like Crystal Palace be called up. Normally we just see maybe a youngster on like a Liverpool or Man City just kind of all of a sudden called up. Like someone like Cole Palmer who hasn't really seen a lot of game time, but he's on a bigger club. So I think it's definitely good to see from Southgate to recognize where talent is, no matter what. Going forward, with the same kind of thought, soon we should see Rico Henry called up as well. I think he's more than deserved a call up for being one of the better left backs in England, being an English player. Uh, and it just not to go on a tangent, but Eze didn't disappoint in his final game before joining Sir Southgate and his waist jacket because Eze had a fantastic goal to kind of seal this off. This was a weird game because again, it was kind of dull in the first half. There wasn't a whole lot done, and with Wolves, Wolves are interesting because they sold Mateus Nunes and replaced him with Enzo Gonzalez, and we'll have to see how that works out. Don't have a lot of chances in the first half. I think there's one where that Palace kind of had this where Wolves kind of nearly gift this. It's a horrid mistake by Jose Sa, who's being pressed. I think by it's either Jordan Ayew or even it's maybe Lerma, and then he just passes it to a Wolves player who has a Palace player directly on him. I think that's Lerma, right on his shoulder. Lerma gets the turnover, and then he kind of passes it to IU. And the only reason why this isn't a goal is because of really good, recovery by Max Kilman, who kind of slides in. He's able to stop this from going in. But that was really it. There wasn't a whole lot of I mean, like Saha. I mean, Eze maybe nearly drew a PK early in the game. It's 50-50 there, but this was quite dull. And then out of nowhere, it blew up. So the first goal from Palace with Edouard, and just Mitchell kind of gets the ball free on the wing and sends in the ball with a really good delivery, and Edouard makes a good run into the 6-yard area and finishes it. And it's a similar goal that Edouard scored versus Sheffield week one, just kind of recognizing to be in that 6-yard area and to attack a ball that's crossed in, and he does a good job there. And then in a similar respect for Wolves, they get the goal with a good delivery themselves. This one, Neto kind of, I think it's a free kick, and Neto sends the ball in. That Wang's able to direct a header into the back of the goal. And then we've got a couple of different decent efforts in a row by Palace after the Wolves goal. First from Jordan Ayew, kind of forcing a save, and then Eze has a good free kick that nearly goes in and forces a strong glove save. And then just minutes after being denied from the free kick, Eze makes a count with an amazing goal, really, in the 78th minute, where Hodgson also did something here where he made a clever sub. He brought on Mateta to play alongside Ayew and Edouard. He didn't actually just switch Mateta and Edouard. He found a way to play both at the same time. And Mateta is quite a big body, and what happens here is Joe Ward just goes long, and Mateta wins the header, knocking it down to Eze's path. And from there, it's pure skill by Eze to control the ball the way he does with it on his hip, on the run in the box with limited space, and he also gets a shot away before being met with defenders, and it is a great finish. He's able to kind of just poke this away. Um, and then the third goal with Palace happens, where again the Mateta change really does show up, and I think it's what wins Hodgson the points. To be honest, like him and Edouard link up well here for the third goal. Edouard just drops for the ball, and Mateta is kind of hanging up to occupy the center backs. Edouard gets the ball and plays it to Mateta, and then Mateta kind of lays it off back to Edouard, no look style, to Edouard kind of making a run, joining him into the box. And then from there, there's a little good fortune to go through because it goes through a lot of Wolves' legs. But Edouard's able to find the ball into the box, and he cuts inside to avoid Kilman, so he shows some good instinct here. And then slots it into the corner. Really good finish. Watching this, I don't understand why he doesn't score 12, 15 goals a season. It's not a confidence thing, at least in this game. He showed no reason why he can't score more for Palace, and he hasn't really been given a lot of game time uh, in the past. I don't necessarily know if Vieira didn't necessarily rate him or what it was, but he's got 2 goals at least in this game, and he did score versus Sheffield. Palace came into this game, I think, only scoring 2 goals for the entire season. So I want to see a little bit more from Oates and Edouard. So we'll see if that's in the cards. They also have Olise to add to this, so maybe they can be a little bit more attack minded. And then Wolves are able to kind of get one late. Mateus Cunha, the game's already over, but it is good to kind of see Cunha finally finish because he has been getting a lot of chances this season as well, just not really taking them. And to be honest, I like the reaction. It's kind of lame to say, but it is his first goal of the season. And really, instead of celebrating it, he understands it's kind of the last minute of the game, and he just kind of puts his head down and goes to the ball and kind of does like kind of a hand clap with his teammate, but he doesn't really like go to the corner or whatever and kind of lose his mind. He keeps perspective. So I think that's good. It's good to kind of see that you're keeping things. You think about the team. I guess you could say. Uh, I mean, the full take was this was a good game to kind of showcase the difference between the two sides because it feels like they have similar squads and similar weaknesses and strengths, and both only scored 2 goals coming into this, and Wolves only had 4 shots on target. Palace had 11. Palace also have Eze. That is a big difference as well. I mean, Palace exploded in the second half here. 10 shots and 8 on target, 16 shots and 11 again, as I said. And they, Wolves had a little bit majority of the ball. Palace were fine, kind of sitting back and defending a little bit with it. But when they get the ball, oh man, they look good going forward. So Roy Hodgson has maybe still got it. To be honest, I mean that Mateta sub I do think won them the game, and Roy's doing what he's done in the past. He's depositing those early wins, those early points, in August and September. Where when it comes to May, when it comes to like March and April, that stuff matters. That's how he kept Palace up in the past, even when his teams weren't really that good, especially after like February when they completely fell apart. You're starting to see at least that blueprint again. And then Eze is special. And yeah, I floated him for City. I think he actually was linked to City towards the end, and you can see why. He's just he can play pretty much everywhere in midfield, and he's creative. He's not necessarily quick when it comes to, like, speed. He's not gonna, necessarily make runs in behind, but he's got an eye for a pass. He's clever. He's sneaky on the ball, and, it's something that necessarily, England haven't always had. Though, Foden's kinda starting to offer that, a little bit, as is, Madison. But, it's good for England to at least reward as with a call-up, and I do think it's deserved. And, they're able to hold on to Decore, and Edouard, again, he gets on the board, and if he can just, find out a little consistency, Palace aren't gonna have any issues, and you have Elise to add to this. And then, with Wolves, they are struggling for consistency, especially with Fabio Silva. Kolasinac, he keeps coming on as a sub. I think we should maybe kind of see him started, next game instead, maybe started with Cunha. I mean, only 4 shots on target. And they have lost Mateus Nunes, and we'll see what they can do with Enzo. They get Liverpool. They host Liverpool. After the international break. I think it's the early game as well. And Liverpool lost this game last season. I think it was they lost it like 3-0. They got battered. And Gomez in particular had a horrid game that day. I do remember that. And Gomez might actually have to be asked to play again. So I mean, it is a different Liverpool side, especially it's a revamped midfield. So maybe we'll see that. I think Milner to play that game, and that made me melt down. So I mean, we'll see. It's not probably what Wolves want to play. Coming back from the international break, even though it is a game at home. But again, we'll have to see. And then with Sheffield and Everton, this game is also one that ended with a lot of goals that I just really wasn't expecting. And 2-2 goals from Decore, and then Cam Archer really did announce himself. And then Pickford basically had an own goal, but I credit this to Archer. And then Dan Jema. But this game was all about both teams debuting 2 new strikers, brought into the final week, and both were quite good. And this game was, again, it was way more exciting and fun than I was really expecting. I mean, with Everton, Beto, they signed this Beto guy from, I think it was Udinese, and he debuts, and I think he had a really good debut. And then, Michael Keane was benched again. Iwobi was sold off. And let's see, we had Lewis Dobbin kind of benched. We saw Danjuma kind of played instead. And for Everton, it was a bunch of positives because you got to see Dwight McNeil make a return in the second half. And the only issue is the back line still looks really slow. I mean, Tarkowski and Braithwaite, it's not necessarily Michael Keane bad, but it's still an issue. Ashley Young, I think, was a big issue. They need Mikolenko back. They need to find a way to kind of do that. And then with Sheffield, we got to see Cameron Archer get a debut, and man, did he look good! And he's found a way to bench Usala and Traore, Benny Traore, and I think that's probably going to continue, especially the way he looked. Um, Everton get the first goal from basically I think it's a corner kick, and Onana kind of wins the first header. Onana just towers over people, and then Decore kind of just follows up. There was an Everton chance for Danjuma, where Patterson just kind of crossed the ball into the box, and it just kind of goes unnoticed, and it falls to Danjuma, and he hits the shot wide. He fixes that a little bit in the second half, and Hammer was able to force a Pickford save. But a couple notes I had was Sheffield. I thought were playing with fire, trying to pass from the back, and it seemed they were giving it back to Everton a little bit more in their own end that they probably should have wanted. But then they were able to equalize here. And what a goal! What a goal this was for Cam Archer, young Cam Archer. The ball is just sent in the box by Hammer, Gustav Hammer, McBurnley then has a very good close control to trap this, and then he kind of lays it off to Archer, and then he just directs it into past Pickford. There's a lot to do here for Archer. He could easily hit this too high, too hard, and instead he just fires it into the corner. And what a debut goal! And then I got a couple good notes for Beto. Beto kind of showing some good hold to play. He forces a good corner kick, or forces a corner kick by being strong on the ball and holding on to it by being pressed. It looks quicker than you would think as well. It shows up some pretty good link-up play in a couple of these. There was another time when he turned and was able to play Danjuma running behind him. So I think that was good. We didn't really see Beto as far as what he can offer as far as a goal threat, but at least as far as just being able to someone to be someone to hold on to the ball and just kind of link up play, or someone to just if nothing else to maybe kind of bully the ball a little bit. I mean, he seems to be quite physically dominating. He's what they need. It's someone, especially given with Calvin Phillips and his injury. It's such a different stature than what Neil Maupay was, and it's maybe the way that Dyche likes playing. He's going to. I think he's going to be a good signing for them, especially for what they need. I don't know if it's necessarily enough. I need to see him actually score, but for the debut, that it wasn't that bad. And then we get to the second goal with Archer. And it's kind of a Pickford own goal, but I credit this to Archer. This is such a good play by him. And, he cuts inside and basically he fires a shot outside the post, or it's outside the penalty area, 25 yards out, and it just banks really hard off the post. Pickford dives and it banks off him. And this comes from just kind of Sheffield going long. Halmer gets the ball, and it kind of looks like Enzo Fernandez last week. The way he controls it, and then kind of fires it off the bounce upfield to Archer to run onto. And then from there, he's able to just kind of, tells Pickford to kind of pick it out from, again, 25 yards out. But I thought Everton's back line was still too easy to get in behind. And then, we get to halftime, and then everything completely changed. Everton came out of the box flying, and they quickly equalized with Danjuma. And again, it's just kind of a simple ball crossed in by Patterson from out wide that Dejima is able to kind of tap in. But there's really good link up play by Beto in the build-up as well. But this is almost like straight bully ball. There were like 3 or 4 times when it seemed like Everton misplayed a touch or pass, and 3 or 4 times they were stronger and quicker to recover, and it happened every single time. And they were just able to just kind of just quickly just kind of bully the ball all the way upfield, and then it's really good square ball by Patterson. Good ball to go in, and Beto was able to get a center back to get out of possession in this as well. So he played a role in this. And Danjuma is was struggling a little bit before, and I think he's going to benefit by having a striker to kind of play off. And we already see that with a goal. And then Sheffield had a chance with Larici. Kind of, he gets the shot kind of close in the box, and he just hits it over the bar. But I thought, a game that I had was Ashley Young and Tarkowski did look slow. I mean, Sheffield didn't necessarily have a ton of the ball in the second half, but the times they were able to go long, they were struggling a little bit. I thought Sheffield would actually targeted them a little bit, and then at the end, Pickford actually has a double save to save Everton, uh, where I think I have it in the 95th minute. It's just kind of a corner kick, and McBurnley looks like he's won it, only for Pickford to have a dive and stop the ball from crossing the line, and it banks off the crossbar, and then Pickford's able to stop the rebound effort with his head, and it's a fantastic save. Uh, I mean, the full-time take was, yeah, this game was, surprisingly a lot of fun, and I think it's because of the debuts by both strikers. Everton did take control, in the second half, I thought, but, Pickford is basically the hero, so Sheffield maybe feel undone by a little bit as well. I mean, Sheffield had 13 shots and 8 on target, to Everton's 16 and 6. 3 big chances for Everton, or Sheffield, 4 big chances for Everton. Sheffield did have less of the ball, Everton 55%. Sheffield 286 passes, 74%. Everton's for 349, 76%. It's not really great for either team. Sheffield had fun going long and just kind of asking Cam Archer to run on to stuff, and he was that was working for them. So I do think Everton's backline was still kind of an issue, and Everton have loaned out Neil Maupay, and maybe we see why with Beto kind of coming in. He looked quite good for them, and I think Dan Jamer is going to benefit by having a striker to play off as well, because the wide players can be supporting cast going forward, not just be the lead. I think it helps them having a focal point to work off, and I think it'll help them midfield runners, someone that can hold on to the ball. You can play Decoy and Onana kind of making runs, behind them. So And, the negative is, Tarkowski and Young just looked way, way too slow for me, and, it's interesting how they haven't really brought anyone in. They do have Godfrey that they can try, but, I mean, they're kind of scanned a little bit for center back options. Um, and, yeah, let's see, at least with Everton fans, you at least when it seemed like everything was going to be dreadful, Beto has given you something to hold on to be a little bit more hopeful about. We'll have to see if he does actually lead to goals, but at least in this little cameo, it was a good debut. Uh, but it is just not, entirely rosy. I mean, you do ship into to Sheffield, and, to be honest, it would have been more if not for Pickford's heroics, and it's worth calling this out because Everton's backline, through multiple years, has been Swiss cheese, and the only reason why they didn't concede the number of goals that Leeds, Southampton, Bournemouth did last season is because of Pickford. I think Pickford made the second most saves all last season, and, he's only beaten by David Raya of Brentford, and, you maybe see why. This saved them at least a point or even more. Um and then, with Sheffield, I think Gustav Hammer is looking to be a pretty good signing for them. Good attacking player and has his Cameron Archer. So there's at least some positives there. But I mean, negatives is they looked really struggled in the second half. They were being suffocated by Everton pressing them, and they were giving the ball away. So they weren't really able to hold on to it. So a bit of a mixed bag here. A couple ways to kind of look at it. Maybe unlucky that you don't even win it with Pickford making that miraculous save. But at the same time, I also thought they were outplayed. And then to end off with, West Ham and Luton, I'm gonna end with this game because it was on Friday, and it was long ago. Not necessarily to slight West Ham. West Ham win 2-1, but this could have been a little bit more. I mean, it was Luton Town home opener, is what's kinda saying that, and, yeah, it wasn't necessarily their worst home opener. They do go on to lose, but the crowd did see a goal, scored, and, the way the game kind of ended, at least, in that final dying minutes, there was a 50-50 call that kind of went against them, we can maybe say, because, it looked like, James Ward-Prowse had a it was like a corner kick. He was trying to defend the corner kick, and, the ball, I think, basically landed on his hand, and it is high. It's over his shoulder. So yeah, we've seen that given. So I was surprised a little bit that VAR didn't necessarily overturn that. Didn't get the home bounce, I guess you could say, the home break. Um, but for the most part, it's more of a kind of a hit and hope. Because I do think Luton was still a little outplayed. They had 16 shots. I think only one on target, which is that is a big issue. They crossed the ball a lot as well. I'll get to that as well. With West Ham continue their good form. I was worried about them to start the season. To be fair, that was before they made their signings. Edson Alvarez has looked to be quite a good signing. I was worried about his passing last week versus Brighton. He fixed that up this week. With I think he had 90% accuracy, and I think he had something like 60 or 70% pass or 70 accurate passes. And then Ward-Prowse. Ward-Prowse is a good passer on the ball, and you have him, you have Ward-Prowse, you have Paqueta, you have a little of triangle there that aren't bad on the ball anymore. It's a different West Ham than we've seen in the past, and they've got Mohamed Kudus to add to this, who's got goals in him. He's got screamers in him. He can be a finisher, or he can be a match winner. So yeah, there are reasons to think of West Ham a little bit differently. I was worried they were going to be a relegation contender. It is kind of still early, but I mean they've definitely shut me up a little bit with that way because all they've done is match Liverpool, Arsenal, and Spurs for points to open this 4-game stretch. I mean, they get the first goal with Bowen, and it's nice play by Alvarez. You're knocking it around about, just kind of keep it moving, and he combines with a Ward-Prowse here, and then Bowen, and then as the ball advances to the final third, from there Paqueta gets the ball, and he floats a very nice ball into the box, curling towards back post. That really only Jared Bowen can meet this, making a run, and who heads it in past Kamansky. No one on Luton Town tries to kind of close this down, but this is closes down Paqueta. This is a perfect ball sent in that finds Bowen. This is really hard to defend against. There was a chance maybe for Morris in the 80th minute. Uh, Probably actually a big chance. It's not really easy because the ball kind of does bounce like 8 yards in front of the goal, but he snatches it over the bar. And this match proved costly because just a little bit after that, or maybe it's actually blocked. But anyways, yeah, it's right after that is when West Ham get the cushion that they were looking for, and it's just Kurt Zouma kind of jumping over everyone to make it 2-0. And no, it's none other than Ward-Prowse again assisting from a corner kick, and Ward-Prowse has joined with the best set piece delivery, has joined the best set piece team from last season. So obviously that's already paying off some dividends here, and Luton Town can maybe do better kind of marking because Luma has a free header and wins it, and then Luton Town do at least get something at the end with Anderson. Um, Morris wins the first header and directs it in the 6-yard area where Anderson is first to head it back in. And there could have been maybe more in the game because, again, that Ward Prowse hand incident did happen. I mean, so it could have been worse, maybe a little bit unlucky. I mean, 16 shots is not bad, but the one on target is. Three big chances for Luton is worth kind of saying that as well. West Ham only had 11 shots and two on target. It wasn't really the cleanest game for West Ham, though they did have 500 passes and 83% accuracy. Better passing from them than we've seen. But this was wild. 10 of 31 crosses from Luton Town, 1 of 15 for West Ham. Luton seem to have a style of play. They've got Carlton Morris, they've got Adebayo, who is like 6'4", and it seems the idea is to get the ball out wide to like Ryan Giles or Caballo, and just kind of cross something in. And with better delivery, maybe this is can be a decent way to play. I do think they need to get better a little bit defensively, but I mean they at least were competitive in a better way than they've been in the past. They didn't let the game get by them than they have. And West Ham have been one of the better teams, and we're going to see how real to take them because they host Man City. I think after the once the uh, Premier League returns. So we'll see how this works out. And they've done a pretty good job to splash that Declan Rice money to bring in Ward-Prowse, Kudus, and Edson Alvarez. So we'll see how that works over the course of the season. And Zuma versus Holland is going to be a pretty good fun matchup if we get to see that. And yeah, again with Luton Town, it's not the best way to christen the stadium, but it could have been worse. I think it's a good wake up call that they've got a lot of work to do. I do think they have had better delivery in this game from the wide areas, and it feels like to score they're going to need that because that's the necessary theme. The attacking players can create goals on their own, so they'll need that. I think Ross Barkley maybe has some goals in him as well. Maybe he can get some chances near the penalty area. Maybe he can convert some of those. That would help them. But Luton Town really aren't the only ones. A lot of no one's really in the promoted side has won a game yet. Everyone's kind of been struggling a little bit. There's at least some of that, but I think it is interesting how this is on the back of last season when all three promoted sides stayed up. So there is at least first 4 games into the season. That doesn't look like that's going to happen. But still, it's early days, and we're only maybe the international break has come good for a couple of teams, and maybe it's come at a terrible time for a couple of days. I don't think Spurs wanted the international break. Uh, but anyways, that is it. That is week 4, and that is it. So for me at the reserve squad, you stay squatting and stop recording.